So welcome to Semantic Publishing Bootcamp. And for all those just coming in, we just set up a new table in the back so everybody can have lunch and enjoy your lunch and dessert while we get started with our program. So nice to see everybody. My name's Kathy Greenler-Sexton. I am the Vice President and General Manager of the SIIA's Content and Information Services Division. And today we are your hosts of this event. And a number of our colleagues throughout the SIIA help out with this event. And I'd like just to acknowledge Luis Hernandez, who is the VP of our SIPA division, who runs that, is here as well. Luis, welcome. A big thank you today goes to Temis. They are our sponsor of today's event. I'd like the Temis team to please stand up and be acknowledged. Without their sponsorship, they are enabling us to put on this great event. So everybody from Temis, please stand up. Thank you. For those of you who do not know the SIIA, we are an industry association of 850 companies that are global, from global Fortune 500s to pure startups. They really range the full breadth of the software and the information industry. We provide advocacy and intellectual property protection for our members at the core of what we do. You can see of what I refer to as our map of the association. And around that core are industry-focused divisions, which help our members in the industry really participate in vertically focused areas such as education technology, software, specialized niche publishing, business media, and information services. You can see the map with the different division heads, and if you're interested in any of that, by all means, just please let me know. Jenny Hansen, our program manager, or Luis Hernandez would be more than happy to answer any other questions for you on that. We do have an event I'd like you to mark your calendars for, and this is a new event that we're launching November 10 through 12 in November in Miami, the Business Information and Media Summit. It's at the Fontainebleau, which is an amazing hotel, and it's where the Beatles, I believe, had their second concert here in the U.S., so it's got a big history. It's a wonderful Art Deco hotel, and we are going to be combining our data content conference, our SIPA marketing conference, and our ABM executive forum, and we've really remixed that, if you will, into an event that's really going to be the place for anybody in the industry to really learn and network across a number of different areas. I also would like everybody to put this on your calendar as well, which is our Cody Awards. Our host is a multiple Cody Award winner in multiple categories, and we'll be opening up nominations in September. And these awards really celebrate the best in products in the information industry, whether they're legal products, STM products, products focused on advertising, really the breadth. We have over 75 categories, and it really is one of the cornerstones of what we do here at the SIIA, recognizing product excellence. And that's really what today's conference is about, which is helping everybody achieve product excellence. So with that, I would like to invite Fernando Mesa, who is our founder of Claret, up to the stage here. And Fernando is a technology leader in the semantic and big data space with 20+ years of experience in both large and established corporate environments and agile startups. Fernando is a former CTO of MarkLogic, a leading NoSQL database, and was also chief architect at United Health and Wolters Kluwer. He currently leads Claret. How do I pronounce that? Clarté, thank you. I suddenly had a brain cramp, and I don't want to keep goofing that up. Clarté, a New York City startup in big data analytics. Clarté collects billions of signals obtained from a multitude of data sources in a giant data set of facts and relationships. Clarté applies this to graph layers of industry-specific ontologies, industry information, and analytical tools, which are then ultimately tied to business intelligence solutions using Clarté's blend of purpose-built intuitive graph visualizations. Now, I have to say, I've read many bios in my day, and anything but this audience, any other conference may not understand that full bio, but this audience does, which is great. And there will be a quiz. Now, I asked everybody, is there something that would be very interesting for the audience to know about you? And Fernando said to me, he said, well, he was so fed up with the health insurance companies' incompetence in providing physician data that he built his own semantic application using public domain data just to find the right specialist for his family. That is a true fact. So this is somebody who knows semantic, he knows data, he knows technology, and just whips up products so he can do some special things and find the right people for his family. So thank you, Fernando, and I'm looking forward to your talk. Welcome, Fernando.
So I'll switch to the tool that I know and love best, Keynote. So the topic of our keynote is turning text into things, the future of semantic publishing. There's going to be a theme throughout my presentation, and it's two things, semantics and soccer, or as we call it in Colombia, football. So, I think you heard enough about me. We'll go over the important part, and I'll summarize what was just said is, I believe that there's use for semantic technology, the principles of semantic technology in the world of business intelligence. I believe in it so much that I left a great company with great people to pursue that goal. And I think that the world of BI, as content produces more and more data, the world of BI and content publishing will merge. And I think that semantic technology will be that unifying layer. So you're going to see more and more products that follow that vision. So let's talk about what is semantics anyway. The reason I bring this up is because semantics suffers from the very same thing that it tries to address, which is there's too many understandings for the same word. So let's at least get a sense of what semantics means, and semantic publishing more specifically within this audience. Hopefully we'll get some consensus. We're going to figure out how is it that it came to be what it is today. Also how the parts that make up semantic technology and how they're used for semantic publishing are greater than just putting those individual pieces together. We're going to go over what it is today, and more importantly to you, I'm sure most of you come with pen and paper looking for killer use cases that you can take home and see if they're applicable to your industry. And I hope we can do that today. And what the future holds for the technology and the products that it builds. And there'll be some Q&A. So this is the framework that I would like to use for the conversation today during the presentation, which is semantics covers two spectrums that are intertwined. They're not separate, although some people work with them separately. They provide greater value when joined together. One is the pursuit of meaning. What does this mean? Especially in the world of textual content. What does this text say? Easier for us when we read something, even as small as a tweet. Not so easy for machines. And there's a number of technologies and concepts that are used for that purpose of understanding the meaning of things, taking text into its meaning, the things that it represents. But also there's the notion of a web of connected data, that if I can represent this information cleanly and in a way that allows for anyone to explore this data and understand what it means, that there has to be value in the connection of that information itself. That even if you understand the meaning, there's greater value when you connect that meaning with something else. It isn't just intrinsic on its own. Otherwise, we'd end up with a bunch of silos, which I'm sure all of the large publishers can relate to. But it's more than just the silos, it's how do we connect that information. And there's a number of technologies available to help that, and all of that supports semantic publishing. So when you're looking at the greater goal and value that semantic publishing can give you, think of all these technologies and how each one of them can be a great ingredient in that soup that ends up being the use cases that support semantic publishing. So we'll go over those in one moment. So how did this evolve? So we understand the concept of books, yes, all of that, and then how the HTML came in, the World Wide Web, and we broke information into pages. That was great, but pages were just not descriptive enough, and they were not granular enough. So there was the notion of, it's very hard to understand the World Wide Web, what it means, if we don't have the ability to distill the data to its most basic elements, and those are called facts. So taking the information that was produced in HTML and other content, even in XML, and generating millions and millions of facts. And this is one of the things that you're going to see as you explore semantic technology. Just the number of facts grow exponentially the more information you pass on to them. And then you see how growing, there is a different representation for those facts. And that's in the form of what we call RDF. And I'll touch on that in a minute. But there's other standards. Companies are either moving into RDF or they're moving away from RDF, but they're all trying to solve a similar problem. Now, in how the information is represented today, there's two camps. There's a camp that says, if you look at companies, well, I mean, AstraZeneca and others, they look at information and say, you know what, if I take information from here and I distill it into the facts, then I don't need that information. All that I need to know about that data is in the facts that I extracted. And I can analyze them, I can query, I can semantically understand them, while others say no. Those facts can live with the data itself, and in fact, living with the data itself will provide greater context and value. So there are some people who believe that that is the best approach in describing this information that we know in the form of facts. So whatever approach you choose, I think the greater value that you'll see is in describing that information in a way that can be understood, not only by the machines within your department and within your enterprise, but also by systems around the web at large. So the evolution of these systems also applies to search. We saw how in the days of the web, text analysis and term-based, keyword-based searches was the form in which most of us used technology. In fact, if you look at the Google, when it began, it was just a great keyword-based engine. As information is distilled into more meaningful facts that describe not only the structure of the data, but its meaning in a way that is applicable to us human beings, we see how concepts begin to gain value, describing not only this is about football or this is about specific sports, but also there is the concept here of a sentiment of winning and losing. And then the greater one, as you see the different standards being applied at the top, is using linked knowledge models. So in which information can be better linked, better represented, better linked, and better delivered. And that's where the notion of semantic publishing comes into play. So getting to that top level is where I think the value that you'll yield and how semantic publishing will be able to do its best. Let's start with how can that be done. If you remember the elements that I put in that cookbook for semantic publishing, one was in the pursuit of meaning. And one of the things that people need to, in order to gain that pursuit, is to describe the things they know, right? So we have a description of knowledge that needs to be put in a way that can be shared amongst individuals, but also among systems. How many of you here use ontologies, taxonomies, control vocabularies in your day-to-day activity? Okay, so there's a few that don't. That's okay too. In fact, when you're working with companies where the notion of an ontologist is foreign to them. You need to describe the value that a knowledge, the description of that domain in the form of an ontology brings. So it's great for us publishers, but there's a large part of the world that doesn't even understand what an ontology means. And there's ways of describing that ontology that can go from a spreadsheet, I've seen ontologies being described that way, all the way to a very complex ontology like OWL. So for you to be able to distill the facts into meaningful forms, it is important that you understand what that is. And I think ontology is a great, and taxonomies and ontologies are a great tool for describing those. This doesn't have to be very difficult for non-ontologists to understand. In fact, if you look at this representation, this is a representation of an ontology, of a SCOS thesaurus that you see here. There's a lot of tools that can make the discovery of that knowledge easier for non-ontologists. A lot of the semantic publishing projects, many of them fail because of the complexities in the ontology itself. So figuring out a way to bridge that gap and bring the knowledge in a way that's visually appealing and easy to understand to the users will become important. Then comes, after you define those taxonomies and ontologies, comes the world of text mining. And this is when things get interesting. If you have content, then you have to text mine. This I just grabbed this morning from the BBC, which is one of the best use cases there are today for semantic publishing. But this thing that you see here, to be understood and applied, you're going to have to extract facts from it. And there's a number of text mining techniques and companies. Temis is a sponsor, so they'll be able to tell you a lot about what they do. But it's not just the simple thing of understanding what US and John Brooks is, but to be able to understand the events. Disambiguate, is football here? Am I going to put it in the US football section? Probably not. It should go into the soccer section. But also to do interesting things like fingerprinting. So entity extraction, that's all cool, but I've done it a million times. The notion of understanding the fingerprint of a piece of content so that you can apply relationships to it is a notion that I think the semantic web is moving more and more to. If you look at companies like the Financial Times and others that Temis has as customers, you'll see how fingerprinting plays a large role in deriving related content. So text mining is a big part of that set of tools that are needed. We talked about the semantic web, which is this vision that the world can better understand the meaning behind the information that exists in the internet by describing it in a way that follows a set of standards that allows interoperability between systems and common understanding. There's also linked data, which is how it is that this vision is represented. And there's a number of standards that support linked data. So the standards, as we mentioned before, like RDF for describing the information, Sparkle for querying that information, ontologies for describing the knowledge of that information, RIF for describing the rules that determine the inferencing that that information can yield. All of those notions are powered by this idea and the implementations of linked data. An interesting use case that you should look at if you get a chance, and we have Luigi here who can give you more details, is Nature Publishing. Those guys have done a great job in taking their information that you see here, taking their information, describing it in a way that can be understood by the users and machines, publishing it on the web in a linked data form where any user can ask Nature Publishing for their journals and articles using a Sparkle endpoint. Basically, I'm going to ask that source of information for answers using a standard language and an API. I think that's breaking new ground, where you don't necessarily have to have a 3-month conversation trying to understand what are the APIs that I need and how is it that I'm going to get the data. So I think companies like Nature Publishing, who understand the value that linked data can provide to their enterprise, but also to the community at large, is where a lot of the publishers are moving into. So I think that's a great use case of how linked data is not just this esoteric concept that I read about and I forget because I got other things to worry about, but something that is tangible and is producing value to companies today. Once you have all this information that you're distilling and extracting and you're putting together, you need a place to put it. And that's typically called a knowledge base. There's a number of knowledge bases, and there's approaches as to how this knowledge is stored. One of the ways in which it's stored is either a graph database or a triple store. And there's a number of them out there. We have a number of vendors who have triple stores here today who you can ask about their technology. There's also companies that are taking a different approach than the semantic web model for creating publishing tool sets. And they're using something completely different, which are graph databases that don't necessarily follow the rules of the semantic web. They have their own language, their own implementation. They're successful at different use cases, but you have the ability to choose which one it is that you want to use as your knowledge base. For the company that I built, the problems are sufficiently complex that I need both. I need triple stores because they provide me the ability to use the RDF model for a lot of open source data that I use internally. And I'm sure all of you as publishers are either thinking or applying open source data that exists. It cannot just be the government who's snooping. I mean, if you see what the government is doing in terms of leveraging value out of the work of other people, that is something that I think every publisher should be thinking about. If you can do it in a way that is legal and ethical, then you're doing better. So figuring out a way to explore that open source data is key to getting more mileage out of the information that you have internally. But a lot of this data comes in the form of the semantic web standards. So therefore, a triple store makes a lot of sense there. Other companies say, you know what, forget the semantic web. There's a lot of tools and technologies. I'm just going to start coding. And they get a graph database and they start creating tool sets. Again, you're going to find yourself that to get the most bang for the buck, you're going to end up using both technologies. But that knowledge base is crucial to the success of your semantic publishing platform. I don't know if you use, please raise hands again, who is using graph databases or triple stores within their corporation? Great job. For those who are not, what you're going to find is that as the value in the relationships of your own assets begins to grow. So this is one that is used to describe what kind of technology should I use in the world of big data, which has also a lot of applicability in the semantic publishing space. So what kind of technology should I use? And one question that is asked is, how valuable are the relationships in your entities? So are you working on the information as stands, or is there greater value in that? An example is, if you're looking at social media type problems, relationships between different facts clearly is very high. It's not just whoever is listening, but who is connected. So what you're going to find in the semantic publishing is that most technologies will have a combination of these three: a document, an RDBMS, and some sort of triple store or graph database. So that's when you're going to be finding that to truly enact the value and the power that semantic publishing can yield, you're going to need that sort of technology behind the scenes. So let's take a look at the future of semantic publishing. So once we saw all of that, those components that will be useful in your quest to build a great semantic publishing platform, or even a POC, that we don't have to aim too high from the start. Again, I got this from the BBC. For those who do not know the BBC use case, the BBC leverages semantic technology to help their editorial team annotate the information. So as information comes in, They're not really creating pages. They're creating content pieces. Call them blocks, call them whatever, facts, micro formats, you name it. Those get tagged either via topic, concepts, or other types of extra metadata. And then when they want to publish something, rather than creating a page, they just say, I want to create a page about something. So when they create a page about the US soccer team, they have already created the linkages to bring the content together for the purpose of displaying it here. So it makes the process of generating all these different pages for so many teams, so many scores, so many games, much easier because they had been semantically annotated before. But it's more than just the dynamic publishing that we loved and knew before. You remember custom publishing? It had some rate of success. I won't say that it took the world by storm of generating content dynamically. But the notion applies here because there's a lot of problems that you as a publisher have that are described here in this one page. And I'm going to show you that. So rather than seeing the page as it was, we're breaking the page into components that are interlinked together for the purpose of reuse and for the purpose of immediacy. If you can build this thing faster by having the machine put it together rather than through a person that needs to drag and bring all this information individually, then you're constrained by the scalability of your own internal staff. But if you can have the machines do that, brings a level of efficiencies, of immediacy, and of value to the customer. So look at all the things that you can do in terms of semantic publishing, that you could apply its concepts for your own specific use case. One that I'm going to talk about in terms of use case is advertisement. The one there, because I think it's a killer use case. How many of you are involved in how the content is sold and or advertised? Okay. For those who don't, and this may be the way in which you can get the project in your own corporation. So advertisement began, I'll just go over the 1 second explanation, began by companies looking to advertise on the web the same way that they wanted to advertise on TV. So they looked for websites that looked like the TV shows that they knew. So if you wanted to advertise to a young audience, you look for the websites that targeted the young audience. Easy. Then became the targeting by subject, where not only do you target the sites, but also the people. That's where the majority of advertisement is done today, digital advertisement, I mean. You buy ads based on a profile, a persona that's determined by usage. So I'm advertising based on the fact that this is a 40-some-year-old who likes semantics and does work in technology and likes football or soccer. So based on the individual, a lot of the advertisement is done today. Now there is the notion of semantic targeting. And if you don't believe me, look it up, because it's in Wikipedia. Semantic targeting is, if I can understand the content that is being displayed there, then I can use the concepts in that content to drive the advertising. So that if someone is reading about football, an article about football, but it really talks about how great Brazil is as a destination, then what you want to do is put an advertisement that relates to travel. So taking the notion of what the text says and targeting that to the advertisement that is being done to it, it's what's called semantic targeting or in-text targeting, or it's also called contextual targeting. So getting the notion of that is that important. And it goes even further than that. For instance, in context or semantic targeting will let you know as an advertiser, let's say that I'm American Airlines, and I say, I want an article that talks about airlines and travel. I want to put my ad there, but don't put it if it's talking about that flight that crashed in somewhere and still not found. Where is it? Malaysia? Anyway, you get the point. So you have the ability to tell in your targeted advertisement that you want things or you don't want things, or you want to exclude, or only if these things happen. So the way to make that happen is by semantically annotating the content with the right concepts and exposing that intelligence that you have done as a publisher to the companies that are looking at this information. So rather than them text mining your content and guessing wrong what it is about, you can expose your intelligence via the data that you have enriched and through semantic APIs that will allow these advertisers to target your content very, very, very specifically. That is going to drive, in terms of ROI, better click ratio, because there's going to be such a synergy between the content and the advertisement that is going to seem almost seamless. And you see that in magazines where sometimes you see an ad that it looks like content, like you see that a lot, and you're reading, you're thinking it's content, and then you realize that it's advertisement. The point I want to make here is you could make the advertisement so seamless based on the context that exists within your content, and that is one of the goals and values that semantically publishing your data can bring. The last one, the use case that I wanted to show you is this one here. We look at analytics. If you can mine your own data and analyze the data for the purpose of yielding better insights to your customers, then why not? Publishers say, well, I'm dealing with content, I'm not dealing with data, but what if you could extract the information in your content in a way that makes it more data-ish and be able to apply data business intelligence tools to that problem? And we see this a lot. I'm not the only one who thought of it. There's a number of vendors that are using this technology to distill data and content together and be able to express questions in a much more intuitive way. So I'm going to show you that example. Let's see. Now, look at this application. Just as a quick example, what does it say? What it says is, first impression I get when I see it is, let's communicate, right? Instead of 50 drop-down boxes, just let's have a chat. That's what it says. It's inviting you to have a conversation. So here, one of the interesting parts of semantic publishing is how it enables semantic search and the ability to ask questions more naturally. There's a lot of great products out there that are leveraging the notion of human understanding of questions. Because if you have the answers, you already have the answers in your content that you distill through facts, then representing those contents via questions is just a Jeopardy kind of game. So you already know the answers, you distill them. It's just a matter of interpreting the question and mapping it to the answers. So when you say something like, what are the top doctors, doctors in Florida who specialize in pain management, something like that, behind the scenes, it puts this sort of question that the user doesn't see. But they're expressing the question in a natural form. Here, what I'm asking is, give me the top doctors that specialize in pain management in Florida, because I want to look at those doctors to target them as an audience, and I can do that analysis. Here, I'm combining, instead of semantic publishing of text and content, semantic publishing data that I'm combining together through multiple points. So the notion of integrating pieces of facts is not foreign to the data grid or any more than it would be to the world of the content. So, and being able to understand relationships, remember linked data, is not just facts, but how do they relate? And looking at the doctors, in this case, that receive more referrals from other doctors, is a data point that I use to say, there's a lot of people going to this individual, so maybe I should be one of those as well. So it gives you a data point to try to understand the nature. Again, this is content. If you look at the data that you're seeing here, a lot of the data began in the form of content that is being distilled here. Then you have the ability to visually graph that information. I give you another example here, for instance. If I'm going to look for this doctor, for instance, this is an example that we have. There's a number of individuals that I need to contextually understand. This is a New York City doctor. This doctor is a specialist, but specialist of what? I know it because I see him for my daughter, but you wouldn't know when you're looking at the content at large. So I'm going to show you how semantic linking in the form of publishing, which is what I am doing here. I'm publishing data in different contexts. So very simple example is the doctor. Here's the things that it's related to. I want to know what is the specialist according to what I get out of the sources that provide me that information. So what's the therapeutic area of this doctor? I ask the question, and then the information comes here. And it says, well, the individual that you're interested in is a specialty. That's what the information has. It is a specialist. And the general area is specialty. Tells me nothing. So I went back to square one. So this is the information. However, if I could use a technique called inferencing, in that if I know something about an individual, I can infer other facts about that individual. Then I can use inferencing to tell me more about this Dr. McLaren. Anyway, I was going to tell you an anecdote, but I don't know that I have time, but it's really funny, so see me later. This doctor is a specialist, and this is some work that I'm doing for a pharmaceutical company looking at content, and they want to target these individuals, but people like him get lost in the shuffle, even though he's one of the leading endocrinologists. So how do I find that out? I'm going to add more context to the data that is being published by this individual. And what this is doing right now is that it is exploring another connection, which is the drugs that this doctor prescribes. In looking at the drugs that are prescribed by this individual, as you can see here, you can see how insulin syringe, you can see how Lantus, you can see how pen needle, you can see how Humalog. Those are the prescriptions that are given to people with diabetes. And based on the volume that I can distill out of that information, which I could put here, I can then infer that this individual, although it says generically specialist in the information that I get from third-party vendors, I will infer that this individual has some specialty in the form of diabetes management. How could I tell that? Because I can do basically deductive work, and based on the information that is prescribed, I can then infer the information about the individual specialty. So inference, it's a great tool set that you can use to take your facts, put a few rules, and then let the system explode in terms of insights that it can provide for your users. So this is some of the things that can be done in terms of exploring that information visually. Does the people who are looking at this tool know all of the semantic mumbo jumbo that's going on? No. Do they care? No, unless they're technologists. But in the end is, how can I simplify the stack of technology that I have, producing a simple use case that with 2 clicks will give someone the answer that they're looking for. I think that's harder to do than it seems. But making the hard simple, it's part of why we're all in this business. I'll show you that one in a minute. Perfect. So going through the use cases that we had in terms of advertisement, use case 1, interesting use case, and also analytics that you see also the BBC posting there. People love graphs, and they understand things more visually than through text. So if you have the ability to use them and use them intelligently so that you don't end up with the mushroom cloud that some other visualizations offer, then I think you're doing well. So if we look at the future of semantic publishing from not only the dynamic assembly of content, but the reuse of those facts for advertisement, for analytics, for semantic search purposes, and all of the other uses of that content, here's another use of that information that you're generating through your domain knowledge, which is data integration. So you got the content underneath, you distill those facts in the form of graphs that you see on top, and then you can use that information yourself. Throughout what? Throughout these. The information that you're generating doesn't necessarily just apply to your own content problem. So let's say you're the VP of clinical content or a specific journal or a specific scientific endeavor, or I'm the VP of Bloomberg Legal News. All of that information, the more you think about it, there's a lot of applicability to the information that your own domain is creating within your enterprise. So you don't need to worry about the web at large. Even within your own enterprise, there's a lot of reuse for information. So the notion of using semantic technology to the problem of interoperability across information silos makes sense. Those who have been in the data world for a long time understand the challenges that come from, even when I have the same column with the same name, the values in there mean differently. So how do I know that? Well, you do it through something that goes beyond what the relational technologies can support. So it isn't just to understand the structure, but even when you have awareness of the structure, how do you understand the meaning of the information in those columns and in those rows? So if you have a relational database, that doesn't mean that the notions that are applicable here cannot be applied. So looking at the semantic broker and cutting it across the different entities, not only entities, but also across the technologies in your enterprise, I think it will add great value. All right, so let's say you believe what I said for a moment. Just let's play along. Great, I want to enhance my semantic publishing because I'm already doing it, or no, I'm not doing it and I would like to try something that sort of brings that notion of leveraging the facts in my content in a way that goes beyond just custom publishing, because there's a lot more users than just that. How do I get started? Well, I would suggest you do this. One, you get the dream team together. Doesn't have to be an army of individuals. Just get the right individuals together, and I think miracles can happen. So don't look at the sequence as a priority order, just put them together. So one, you need a product manager. Without it, nothing can happen. The technology will be great. The ontologists will make a lot of money. You pay them $400 an hour, and they're going to create a great ontology. But in the end, did I get it right? Maybe it's $250. It's a rare skill. Let me start. It's a rare skill. So, but you need the product manager with the ideas. Without an idea that has value to your business, you're not going to go far. So you need people who are thinking sometimes outside the box and are looking at other industries and are looking at other problems. And they're just not concentrating on that specific problem of how do I get my article out. So you need someone who will have the courage to take chances, to think of great ideas, and to get them done fast. So product manager, in fact, I started my company. So you need an idea person. Without it, the business goes nowhere. Once you have the idea person and you have a great use case, like some of the ones we shared, then you need an architect or semantic developer who will figure out a way to use the right tools and put them together in a way that the idea can surface. So you don't need an army, you need people who know how to use all of these technologies together efficiently so that you don't stay 3 years into a semantic project. There have been those where you spend, again, I love ontologies, but you could spend, especially if you do it in sequence, you could spend 9 months building the ontology, and then at the end, the business is like, what am I getting? So you need to make sure that everything works well and efficiently. So you also need a visual designer. You have to get it out into a visual form. So getting the information in a way that's appealing to the users who will ultimately provide the ROI, either internally or externally, it's key. Don't skimp on great UX design, please. A lot of investments have been done where millions of dollars have been spent on the back end, and then they put a developer to build the web pages, and nobody likes the product. And then you wonder why. You need an ontologist. You need the thinker. You need to be able to have someone who will define the right model for you so that you can then explore that knowledge that you have within your company. So many companies have this you're in, STM, there's so many companies, especially in this publishing space, where the intelligence of your audience is one of the highest in any other industry. So how do you get that intelligence? Some ontologies, folksonomies, getting people to participate into that, and let's get money out of that intelligence that is being held inside. And last, you need the VP of content. So you need the business sponsor. This person is critical to get it past the product manager into the executives and get the funding that's needed. So first steps, product manager, think of something innovative. Architect Semantic starts the whiteboard and POC process, easy. Visual designer starts thinking about a killer UI, UX that's gonna really sexy up the app. Whenever I show my presentation, most people talk about, hey, where'd you get the visualizations from? They're not asking me what triple store I have is, what are the visualizations that you have? And that's where I spend the least. And an ontologist to build simple models and then reuse existing. Look at the models that nature created. If you're in a similar business, look at the ontologies that have been created today so that you don't start from scratch. And you need the person who will buy lunch. You need the person who's going to secure the funding and need to sell within the executive. So, perfect. The technology you need, go back. In terms of a technology, you need text mining and big data tools. If we're in the world of content. If I was having this presentation with companies that didn't have content but data, I might have a different approach, but definitely here in the world of content, text mining is key, and so is big data technologies. You need triple stores and graph databases and/or. Ask me later when is the right time to choose which. You need search through a natural language form like the one I just described, using natural language processing. Technology, you need a CMS tool that will integrate with semantic annotation, like the way the BBC does and other vendors. So being able to annotate the content. Most of what I hear from publishers when we talk about the semantic and all of these approaches is, well, my content needs to be highly curated because it's the authoritativeness of the content more than the volume that matters to the users. But why not have technology hint to this individual who's the authoritative source about things that it finds that the individual may not know about? So combining automation with human-driven processes and make that effective. There's nothing better than two sets of eyes looking at the same problem. And analytics. Look at the inferencing engine, look at the graph functions, all of the things that can, once you have established that mass of content, look at all the tools that can then take that content and bring higher ROI in the form of differentiating factors for you, your content, and your company. So this is going to be a key part of what you do. Look at the technology stack. This is a case of one that I have for my own case, but it's not that different from some of the ones that are out there. And in the end, it's how do you get this cool applications out there in a way that they do intelligent stuff as fast as possible. So with that said, I wanted to thank you. I'll be around. I love to have discussions, only because I want to know what people do and see how different it is from the work that we do at large with other companies. So
Questions?
I don't know if yes,
Yeah,
if
we have
there's time for
we have
questions.
time for a couple questions. Any questions? Come on. Yeah, why don't you just stand up and ask your question, and we'll repeat the question.
Can you give the anecdote that you're saying that was funny?
Well, had I done this work years ahead of time about this specialist, Dr. McLaren, I would have found out that he was, yes, a leading endocrinologist, but I wouldn't have gone to him because he had such thick Australian accent. My daughter cannot understand him. So when we go, we hear him, and then at the end, it's like, did he say this? No, he said that. So he is a very smart individual, but would I have gotten information at large? It would have probably given a different context. So I guess after 10 years, 15 years of seeing the same doctor, you get to learn what they say, but it definitely wasn't without its trials. So again, more data, more context, more intelligence in your decision. So that was what I wanted to say.
How do you feel about the lots of companies are coming out with semantic web clouds in the cloud rather? Azure, just Microsoft's Azure.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of value in those offerings because ease of ramping up. You can build an infrastructure easily. Also, there's a company that has data that is very sensitive. They may want to keep the data in the semantics that are drawn, the intelligence internally, but they want to do competitive intelligence at large volumes, and they use the cloud for that. So let's say I'm working on a specific molecular compound, or I'm working on a specific company that I'm doing research on internally. For example, Thomson Reuters, Bloomberg. There may be information of competitive intelligence that I don't want to flood my systems with, and I just want to have it in the cloud, do a huge big data run, get the insights that I need about that individual from a competitive advantage or company, and then shut it down so that all I have is this still knowledge. So the elasticity factor, and also the fact that I can change my workload to tailor each individual strengths, I think adds value. I wouldn't make it an either or, definitely. I think that the two add value to your problem.
Any other questions? We're so jammed in here, I can't quite walk over with the microphone, so, okay.
Perfect.
Fernando.
Wonderful. Thank you so
very
much. I look forward to meeting you all in person.
We're looking forward to hearing you at the closing panel.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to have a laptop swap here, and I'd like to invite Kathleen to start making her way up to the front here. So while Jenny is swapping out the laptops and Kathleen is making her way up, our next speaker is Kathleen Cotte, and she's the Senior Manager of Taxonomy and Semantic Analysis at Gannett. And with experience optimizing content from sources as diverse as the National Enquirer to NASA, and that is, I got to tell you, quite the range. Kathleen found her way to semantic technology in 2008. She has since been exploring its practical applications while learning the intricacies of the various content enrichment engines. Kathleen currently leads taxonomy, ontology, and semantic analytics for projects at Gannett, owner of USA Today, and more than 80 local newspapers, 40 television stations, and various web properties. So Kathleen wanted to share this anecdote, and I think this really does say a lot about Kathleen, and I think everybody in the audience will agree. Her first week managing the photo libraries for the National Enquirer, Weekly World News, Globe, Star, and other American media publications. So you're getting the gist of the type of publication here. She took a request for photos of ectoplasm coming out of a ghost's head. So think Ghostbusters. Some people were looking for some Ghostbuster photos. Her staff actually quickly found numerous examples of this phenomena, and the requester was very pleased. I'm really curious where you found those photos, but she decided that she was really going to like this job a lot once she found those ectoplasm photos. So please join me in welcoming Kathleen from Gannett. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, and I'm sorry that my boss isn't here. I do have a colleague who heard that $400 an hour figure for ontologists. I'm going to tell you that that is not entirely true. Either that or I am terribly underpaid. But anyway, I will just jump right in because I have a lot to say, and I hope somebody's timekeeping a little bit to keep me going when I'm slowing down too much. So I think everyone has probably heard of USA Today and may not know that Gannett is a very large publisher. 82 newspapers. We started this year with 20 TV stations and now have 42. 6 more. We will basically own all of Texas by the end of this year. We reach 10 million readers weekdays with the print publications, and depending on what number you're quoting, 65 to 100 million uniques with all of the web properties. And we also have newspapers in Europe. We have in England. We have some military publications, medical. There's a lot of other web presences as well. So 130 plus newsrooms, 5,000 journalists, 10,000 at least. We don't even actually really know because, of course, there's not one content management system, but probably on the order of 10,000 content items a day. So a lot of content. I had a request to give a visual on a newsroom, a current newsroom. This is the hub, the national news desk at USA Today. And actually, all of our newsrooms really are kind of going to this model where there's trying to bring the print and the digital together. This newsroom actually tries to produce a lot of content for the local properties. We shouldn't have 82 newsrooms doing a Benghazi story when really they should be focusing more on the local because we have, our properties are so local. So the idea is that this desk does a lot of content that then winds up in our local publications for national and international. And this is video production in the USA Today newsroom. It's actually kind of a good example because we do have those 42 TV stations, but really the newspaper side and the TV side are still pretty siloed. So while we share content fairly well and create content on the newspaper side that we share throughout those 82 properties, we're not doing quite so much of that from the broadcast side to the newspaper side. But several years ago, Gannett figured out that context is king. Context is everything. And that the cornerstone of what we needed to do was to be able to say, what is our content about? And that we were lucky enough to have some executives who understood taxonomy, that it was not about processing dead animals for future use, that it's it is it's this thing, and that tags were really important. And actually, our executive sponsor is the CEO of Gannett now. When she was CFO, she funded this project, but we were very lucky to have that executive support from the beginning. As you'll see, the actual productization of that has been slower than we like, but we do have that executive support. And recently, I'm sure many of you in the publishing industry are aware that the New York Times had done an internal study, and that made its way out into the wider world. And I don't call this out to sort of be astounded that the Times is not doing more tagging. I really liked their use of the word unglamorous in this. This is not really the sexy side of the business, but the infrastructure and the structure have to be there to hold up the building, and that's really what the taxonomy and the tagging are. And so I've sort of been expecting a lot more what is going on with tagging stuff. In light of this, I haven't actually heard a lot. I'd be interested to know sort of from you guys what if the New York Times report is hitting a note in other news organizations or publishing as well. So I want to discuss what are semantics at Gannett right now, because I do, as Fernando pointed out, there are these semantics of what are we talking about, what is our content about, and then there's the semantic web and getting the data in formats that make it readable to the Googles and other consuming systems. And right now at Gannett, we are focusing on that first part. We have building the controlled vocabularies and the ontologies and doing the auto tagging. And later, hopefully, the linked data will come, that we will be publishing, if not all, but some of our data in these consumable formats. So, and when controlled vocabularies, I like to say that the taxonomies are slightly older technology, not that ontologies haven't been around for a long time, but that the concept of, okay, a taxonomy that's just hierarchy, it's just a tag, only takes you so far. The real power and the real, the value proposition is the ontological relationships, the what's connected to what. Even if it's not a natural connection, if it's something that in the background we've defined, but that be there to then present that path for people to follow. If we've assigned this tag, and in the background we know it's related to this tag, then think about the exponential ability to show more content, because we don't just have, okay, here's the tag, and it dead ends. And in old school publishing, when we moved from print to the web, we just kind of reproduced the print product on the web, and it stopped, right? There's a story, and then where else do you go? You can't, we need to give people those pathways to follow. And of course, for the auto tagging piece, USA Today used to have 15 librarians just for USA Today, and of course they've been long gone. We don't really have the ability to, we don't have the financial wherewithal anymore to have people who are indexing all of the content in real time too. So and not just the content that we produce, but we have lots of third-party content that we bring in as well. So what were the use cases? Obviously search, SEO being a big piece of that, but also internal search as well, because when you have 100 newsrooms that you can draw from, and you're sitting in Phoenix and you'd like to know what other content across Gannett you can leverage, some evergreen content about, I don't know, recipes or decorating or something, we have to be able to search internally as well. So internal and external search. But the biggest piece is to power those content products, those related modules and the topic pages, to do the contextual ad placement, to target to specific topics and keywords. We might have a company like Walgreens or Target who wants to be able to leverage the fact that Gannett has 130 newsrooms, and they want to say, I want to buy cold and flu across all of Gannett. Well, we have to be able to tell them what are the cold and flu stories that that we're actually writing, and be able to then actually deliver to those content items, not just randomly say, oh yeah, well you'll get run of site, or you'll get homepage placement, or you'll get maybe a general health topic. They do actually want to target to that level, and then being able to provide the metrics then to the advertiser to say, gee, we have a lot of people who are really, we're getting really heavy usage out of this topic and this topic, and be able to give that to the ad sales people on a regular basis so they can kind of go and target those specific keywords too. And the big piece for the future will be the personalization and recommendation, the customization algorithms that we will build, so that if we know your persona and we know that you've read these particular topics and we know these topics are related to these other topics, that goes into the mix when we're delivering any kind of a module to you. And the one thing I skipped over that I did actually want to go back to was that analysis of our content. I think in many cases, newsrooms think they know what they talk about the most, but in reality, when we first started this project and we had a couple of years of content that we could run through and just kind of start looking at it, everybody was actually quite surprised at how much sports USA Today does. And they don't do any hard science. And we might think that we cover that. Well, but you can really find out, there are these kind of gaps in what you're covering. You may find out that there's something that you have a lot of that is getting hidden and lost, but everybody, we can reuse it or become more of an expert on it. So those are our use cases. So where did we start? Not to slight any ontologists, natural language processors, computational linguists, or other technologists, but we did actually go with a librarian route. The librarians with taxonomy and ontology tendencies. So that just happens to be who've been the primary drivers of this so far. Of course, we work with lots of technology folks to do the CMS integrations and those sorts of things, but for building the taxonomies and ontologies and doing the semantic text processing, it's librarians. And so we obviously then knew that we needed to be able to mine the text. And the original requirement was that we not have a heavily rules-based engine, because that usually requires a fairly significant staff commitment. We were working with the AP. The AP uses one particular text mining system that is rules-based, and they do have a lot of people who are managing that. So we were looking to be for a solution that would allow us to kind of stay away from that. And also that since we have all this content and we're doing it real time, it had to be sub-second response to be scalable for that many newsrooms, and not have anybody in editorial sitting around watching a disk spin when we've sent the content to the tagging engine and asked to get results back, which we do not have. I don't know if it's sub-second, but it's very close. And then we also wanted to do some sophisticated ontology management, which is, by the way, an RDF database. So it's really more of a hybrid of taxonomy and ontology, but we'll get to that. And we, instead of starting completely from scratch, did license people names and events and organizations and things from the AP. So we did inherit some of their data structure in addition to taking those labels. So this is a representation of the Gannett pseudo-ontologies. It really is a taxonomy with ontology characteristics, because it's we could manage all of this in flat lists and do them as complete ontologies, but for a variety of reasons, for managing for interacting with the labels and the tags, for the consuming systems, for a lot of reasons, it's easier to preserve some of these silos and hierarchies and then link them together. So we have these 8 vocabularies, and the numbers represent how many terms are actually in the system right now. So we have 90,000 people, which does kind of surprise me. That's national and international. That doesn't begin to address a lot of our local entities yet. So that's going to grow dramatically. There's nothing under products yet because we haven't done products yet. We're getting there. But but you see, so the idea is if you have a company, a drug company, and that company makes a product, which is a drug, and that drug treats a particular disease, then we are managing those relationships in the background so that when a story is written and the company name has come out as a highly relevant tag for that content item, that we can have a sidebar on, okay, then what are the other drugs that this company produces, or what are the diseases that they treat? And we're not involving editorial to think, oh, what else should I relate to this? But those can all pop up automatically. And then this is a kind of a pull out from one of those vocabularies. This would be a person record. The different colors try to signify the fact that some things are ontological, and those are actually instances that are also terms that are managed in the taxonomy. But the dark blue ones, like the role and the birthday and the definition, those are really more metadata attributes that are maybe just a text field. So if you have a person, you can manage any data point, any kind of relationship that might be significant or useful. Obviously, you might not have a sports team and a movie that they were in, but that this is just to represent the kinds of things that we currently try to maintain. Now, noting that the maintenance of this data, and I'll talk about that more later, that is the biggest hurdle. This shows the very basic technical architecture of what's going on. We are doing this real time. So you are sitting at your CMS, either on the website or on the print side. Those are 2 separate CMSs right now. And you are creating your content, and you hit save, and it calls the tagging engine. What's sitting in between there, that taxonomy service, so that's actually taking the content and transforming it into the format that the tagging engine wants, so it's an XML format, and so it's transforming it, it's sending it to the tagging engine. The tagging engine says, oh, it's about this and this and this. It returns those, that in another kind of, it's right now in a JSON format, so it comes back to the taxonomy service in JSON. They parse the JSON, and then you're sitting at your, when you're in your CMS, you see those tags pop up, sub-second. And you can review them and decide, if you need to add to them or not. So this is all text content that's being sent. We do have, I say broadcast transcriptions and speech to text. We aren't actually really doing that yet. We take a story they write a story for any of the broadcast stuff that goes onto the web, and that's really what we're doing now. We're not taking full broadcasts and doing the entire shows, just story by story. And we also are probably going to add WordPress to this at some point, because again, the myth of having one CMS and publishing, I should say, the goal, we haven't quite got there yet. And you can see from this, so that we have the Thames tagging engine is sitting there. The ontology software, the prepress system, the print system, pings it automatically to bring the terms in, so that as an editor, I can navigate the taxonomies to be able to assign the terms. What happens on the website is that they cache a copy of the taxonomies, and that's what they serve up. And they're not talking directly to the ontology software. And by the way, the ontology software is the Mondeca, is Mondeca's ITM system. And this represents the current workflow. We build the taxonomies. You can build the data models anywhere. I'm sure some people have heard of Protégé, which is open source ontology management. But we actually build them directly into the ontology manager. And we can add terms. We're adding terms every day, either in bulk or individually. We had a request for 4,000 tags from Wisconsin the other day. So some of our properties are stepping up. But we then take the terms themselves and some of the metadata and export it and put it into the Thames tagging engine and build the skill cartridges and do some pre-processing there. And so the CMS and any of the data feeds that are coming in, depending on what system it's going through those two different taxonomy services, but it's all pointing to the same thing and getting the same results, and we're outputting those tags. Now, at the end, right now, what we have is just the tag. We don't have the what are these, then what are the related terms? What is the other metadata? That's the next step of then how do we refer back to that data model to get that information? So we're not doing that path right now. We're just kind of stopping with the tags. This is a record in the taxonomy management system right now. And I just wanted to kind of show you what the metadata attributes versus the related concepts. We have a special topic that's mass killings in America that unfortunately gets a lot of new relations to it sort of on a daily basis. So you see that we have managing not too much metadata about this person, but that since this happened in Seattle, and we have a TV station there, that's the primary market definition. And then we related this to this special topic, and then a general topic of shootings. And we could, since we're not really doing anything with that data right now, this isn't very robust, but you can just see, just sort of what an individual record looks like. And all you do is edit this and add whatever else is in the data model for a value. So what are we actually powering right now? We have some topic pages that are automatic. This is some of them are automated and some of them are curated, and so the tag may have been assigned by the tagging engine, or it may have been assigned manually. But basically, right now, it's just a story list. There isn't, we don't have any. We're not bringing in any other data other than here are all the stories that have been tagged with this tag. And we have national ones as well. This is kind of a good example of when people say, well, but that story's not really about, why is that? That's Letterman. Well, that's not about Jimmy Fallon. Well, the punchlines is a thing that they do every night from the night before's talk shows, and I'm sure Jimmy Fallon was mentioned in there, but that's the kind of thing that we get a lot of. And when I talk a little bit later about what accuracy or the relevancy of the tags is in the eye of the beholder and in the eye of the products. Right? So if you have products that you need absolute purity and it has to be 100% relevant and it can't be any way tangential, then you have to do certain things with the ranking of the tags or any other thing. But this is I'm kind of glad that this one didn't have there was just Jimmy Fallon, because you're going to get a mix of things, because content, especially news content, isn't necessarily only about one topic or one person. Here are some mock-ups of our future, I hope, that are much more dynamic, bringing in many more elements, much more along the lines of the linked data model. If you look at the Lindsey Vonn bio information up there, that would be something that perhaps we brought in from Wikipedia or some other data source, so that was updated dynamically. The related topics would be whatever we're managing in the background that we found are either of interest, and you do it multiple ways. Obviously, Lindsey Vonn and skiing and Olympics and things like that, but also looking at your search data and what people are clicking on and seeing if you can find patterns in that to identify things you're not thinking of but that your readers are thinking of. Like, we know that people in our markets who search for high blood pressure also search for diabetes. And those maybe aren't necessarily related, but we can do that artificial relationship in the background because we know we need to serve that kind of content to people that are looking at those things. So there's all different kinds of factors that would go into what's related content. And it might not seem intuitive, or why would they do that? But there'd be a data reason behind it, because we know that people are going to click on those things because we've related them together. This one is for local communities, bringing in that community events calendar, which so all of this is going to be populated automatically based on having modeled the assets. So modeled exactly what is a photo, what is a video, and the tags that have been applied to those items, and the rules then that might say, if this tag is applied, do this, or even if this is just a straight one for one, this tag goes to this page. So just a little bit on measuring success or just measuring anything. As I referred to before, accuracy, and I don't know if I probably should have used relevancy, but it is very much, who's looking at it and what was the goal of what you were trying to do. If you give a content item to 10 different people, they're going to give you 10 different tags, even people who think similarly. And so when they look at the content and they look at the tags, a good number of them are going to complain and say, why is that there? A good number of them are going to say, oh, that's fine. And again, it gets to the level of granularity you need and want. Someone like me might think, well, we want to tag everything that happened in this, not just what are the top 2 most relevant things, because you're then throwing out other data. That person was indeed mentioned, even if they weren't central to the story. So what does that do for the historic record of you didn't tag it with that person's name? News content is, obviously very different than scientific data. Somebody at NASA who absolutely needed to read all 120 papers that were written about this particular switch. In news, I'm lucky if they're going to want to read 2 stories about the exact same topic. We just that kind of level is actually detrimental to what we're trying to do. We need to have the 360, not the 100 things about the exact same thing. So we have a lot of things to worry about with term acquisition. As I was mentioning, keeping that data updated. When we have our national and international people, movie stars, and people that we can refer to, outside databases like Wikipedia to pull in data, that's fine. But when I'm talking about the mayor of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and some of the business leaders in that community, we're not going to have that data to pull in automatically. Somebody's going to have to keep those relationships maintained. And that is a whole piece of the problem that we haven't resolved yet. We don't have any data on this stuff yet, but what are the KPIs on for what we've actually produced? What kinds of click-through rates and what kinds of time on site are we managing to keep from the topic pages, from the related content? All of that stuff that basically is going to say whether or not this is successful or not. And the softer side of that, are our editors actually able to get more done because they weren't spending time doing the related content modules and searching for things, and content reuse, in particular for outgoing feeds and the ease of generating those feeds. So a couple of things. I think I say that this is issue specific to news content, but I think it's probably true, for a lot of people. But the thing is that there's a big difference between a browsing taxonomy and one that you're going to possibly do for auto tagging. And we're really running into this now with particularly high school sports. And actually this example is for both how did we design the taxonomy and then how does the tagging work. When we talk about our high school sports stuff, we usually will just say the Cougars and the Bears, and you won't really have a machine is going to have far fewer reference points for that was, St. Joseph's High School basketball. When a human looks at it and they understand that because maybe they knew they were in the sports section, or they know that that's what they're reading. So we have a lot of ambiguity and a lot of not explicit the way that we write about things that we have to then try to tag. And I love the government taxation and revenue example. That is a term that we inherited from the AP. And it feels very much like old school human indexing that went on, not so much considering really what the SEO tag would be. Pretty sure that none of you have really gone and thought, I'm going to search for government taxation and revenue. But government taxation and revenue is a pretty clear-cut concept, whereas taxes, if you think about the many different ways that word is used that don't refer to the government taxation kind of thing, then you start getting into, and how does the tagging engine then recognize that? And you just have to think about every term. We get lots of requests, and we think, oh yeah, we'll just throw that in there, that'll be fine. And then you think, oh wait, but there's 4 other meanings to that, and what is that going to mean? How is that going to extract? And what do we do to make sure that then works properly? The homonyms are also kind of painful. We manage each of those people as different entities. So if you've got, Brian Williams, we have like 7 Brian Williams, most of whom are sports people. But we've also got, the guy that's the NBC News guy. So having the tagging engine be able to understand that, having that, if you've got the human browsable version of the taxonomy for editors to look at, right now we actually don't give them any way to differentiate which Brian Williams we're talking about. We had the problem with a lot of geographic locations because we manage the name only as the city name. We don't put city and state. But it turns out that we have to now put the state on that just because I've got all these people sitting in a newsroom in Lincoln. How are they going to know which Lincoln we're talking about or which Springfield we're talking about? So lots of things that you discover when you actually go into production that maybe just, especially when you're inheriting data from someone else that you didn't necessarily know were going to be a problem. So just a couple of things about some of our bigger challenges. I've already mentioned that data acquisition and maintenance piece. Really just not quite sure how that all is going to work. And particularly because even if we can use these outside data sources right now, like to update our celebrities, let's say. Well, I didn't use DBpedia as my original data source. I don't have DBpedia URIs managed in my taxonomy right now, so I can't very easily go out and just grab a bunch of data from DBpedia and throw it in and update the existing records. I would have to make sure that I could tell, which celebrity is this that I'm talking about from DBpedia and match it to the record in ITM. Now, if I go and get updates from AP, because I put all those AP URIs in there, then it's a lot easier because then it's just looking for that address and it says, okay, this is the same guy, update that record. But there's just enormous amounts of data upkeep and data manipulation and reformatting and all that stuff that has to happen. So the bigger piece of it that I know will probably cause some more questions. The categorization-based subject extraction, where we have defined training sets and told the tagging engine, okay, here are 100 stories, and they're all about this particular subject, is a very accurate way to do subject extraction, but is very problematic when your taxonomy wasn't necessarily 100% complete when you did that training. And so we're really facing some challenges there with either we're going to have to redo that categorization model, or because of the dynamic nature of a news taxonomy, think about different ways of doing that. And so I'm getting the high sign here that I need to move along. So I do want to talk a little bit about what would happen, if we started over, a couple of the big lessons learned. And I understand from some people who have looked at this that me saying that I would reconsider licensing taxonomies is something that will raise a few eyebrows. I know you, Fernando, said, reuse people's stuff, use the ontologies that are out there. Certainly from a straight taxonomy perspective, you're going to do a lot of reworking. Your voice and the way you talk about things is going to be very different. Even if you think, even like in oil and gas, where theoretically everybody's talking about the same stuff, they're not. It astounds me the differences, and really, it's a personal opinion, but you're going to do less work if you have a good text analytics piece that allows you to take a look at your content, identify the noun phrases, identify the stuff you're talking about, and just start from there. It will also allow you to not focus on the stuff that you're not talking about. So tagging engines also differ quite a bit. So I think you need to design your taxonomy for the tagging engine you're going to use, because they really do differ. And I think that's something else that we're experiencing, that we have a taxonomy that was designed for a different tagging system, and it does cause some problems. I just want to point out too, rules, you cannot get away from them. My boss hates it when I say it, but we really need we're going to need to ramp that up quite a bit. And have done this now twice where the taxonomy and the new CMS were concurrent. Definitely hope I can avoid that. And then just quickly for the future, as my long-term wish list is that full linked data capabilities as the BBC dynamic semantic publishing model, including this in personalization. That schema.org markup, I don't know if anyone is aware of what schema.org is. There are a lot of different standards, so it's hard to know what you should spend your time and money on. From a publishing perspective, obviously anything that Google has written is probably going to be what we focus on. But that schema.org markup is what will allow better readability of our content by search engines, right? It's telling the search engine, hey, this is a person, this is an event, this is semantic data you should be paying attention to. And when I talk about, there's two different kinds of rules. There's rules, for individual terms to improve extraction. The rules and inference layer that is at the end of the process is that referring back to the metadata, referring back to the relationships and bringing that together to do different things. If tag A has been assigned, great, then I also want to assign tag B. Or I want to detarget. I did want to mention that for advertising, when you've got a plane crash, do not target, do not allow ads from airline A, B, and C to be displayed on that page. So that's a good way to do detargeting as well. So
Thank
Any
you very
questions?
much. Incredible amounts of information and advice. Thank you very much, Kathleen. I'm going to suggest we hold our questions to the end. I wanted to give Kathleen as much time as possible. I'm going to invite Jean up to the podium. And as you can see, what's the verdict on semantics at American Lawyer Media? Daniel and I and the team putting this together, we spent a long time on the titles of all of these presentations. Gene Bishop is the Vice President of Technology at ALM, and he joined ALM in 2006 after working at Dow Jones Wall Street Journal for over 20 years. He actually went from the stockroom to QA to support to development and management. And his career has really given him the keenest appreciation for teamwork and the advantages of technology that it can give you. In his view, from very small workflow changes to large enterprise systems and product launches, when good technology and exceptional people come together, great things are sure to follow. So, as you know, I have a factoid about Gene, and this is actually really, really impressive, I have to say. It's not quite ectoplasm, but it is very impressive. Gene was at the Wall Street Journal, as I mentioned, and was part of the technology and news team that won, get this, a Pulitzer Prize for the outstanding coverage of the events on September 11th, and it was the first time that a technology team was included in the entry in the award. Welcome, Gene. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Let me try that again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Very good. I know I'm the guy that stands between you and the break, so this can go one of two ways. You cooperate with me, we get to the break faster. There's no cooperation, this could be a long afternoon. I'm Gene Bishop, Vice President of Technology, and I'll get into my role at ALM in a little bit. ALM, American Lawyer Media, is a company that was built by acquisition and is held privately. We are primarily a B2B company at the high end when we do business with our top 100 law firms, but as you get further and further along on that tail, we turn into a B2C type of an organization. We are the leading integrated content provider serving the legal and commercial real estate industries. Our channels include over 60 websites and blogs, print papers, newspapers, magazines across the country, over 140 books published print and online, 275 events globally that reach over 50,000 decision makers. Our digital product lines also include smart litigator and verdict search, directories, books, law jobs, CLE, and reprints. We have offices and publications in 9 U.S. regions, Canada, the UK, and Hong Kong. Maybe you recognize some of our brands as they encompass regional and national audiences for a variety of services, including news, newsletters, research in print and online, events in person and virtual. Our award-winning content is fresh, rich, and in-depth. We deliver it in print, online, mobile, and in person. It encompasses news websites and blogs, magazines and newspapers. It also includes case law, document archives, e-newsletter books, citators, verdicts, and expert witness directories. I think it's interesting that in some of the other publishers, I think I have such major content problems, and then I hear something like Gannett where they have 40 newsrooms and 80 television stations, so I'm not quite that big. We generate 10,000 to 12,000 content pieces every month. Our archive grows by about 120K to 150,000 pieces every year. Our digital news archive dates back to 1989. Our content creation points or applications exist for news, cases, verdicts, treatises, public notice, real estate, surveys, and profiles. And each of those all have some regional variation. As I was doing research to put this presentation together, I ran across this very basic definition of semantics. I only show this here because I thought it was amusing that every listing talks about meaning and relationships, yet the sample usage it gives says, let's not argue about semantics. I kind of think that's funny. I guess we do a fair amount of arguing about our meanings and relationships. And if this was your first exposure to semantics, you might decide to walk away. But don't. It can be tricky. It can lead you down some very winding paths. But there's great value in it, and we're working toward better integration at ALM. We have some interesting ideas and fun plans, all with the goals of driving a better user experience, achieving operational efficiencies, and of course, increasing revenue generation. My role is a bit of a cleaner. Are you familiar with Winston Wolfe, Harvey Keitel, from the 1994 cult classic Pulp Fiction? Jimmy, Jules, and Vincent, otherwise known as Quentin Tarantino, Samuel Jackson, and John Travolta, have a bit of a problem. There's a body minus a head and a trunk. Jimmy's wife is due home in 40 minutes, and they call Winston Wolfe. I kind of look at it like just any other project I've ever been involved in. I have to assess problems, evaluate resources and talent, assign tasks, and then direct traffic to an achievable outcome. Sometimes he actually inspires me to get the job done. I'm Gene Bishop, and I solve problems. Now, before I go on, I'm going to need a little of your help. When I use the words, "you may ask," that's your cue. I'll phrase a question for you, but I want you actually to ask the question. So let's rehearse. You may ask, what's next? Very good. Oh, this is going to go well. As if the challenges and the disparity of content creation and the variety of completeness of customer data and all of the nuances that come with it weren't tough enough to work on, we're asked showing why we need to use these tools. How much is it going to cost? What value will you get out of it? How will you maintain it? At ALM, personalization and how we can customize the user experience helps the ROI discussion directly, and it's tied directly to our digital strategy. We've moved to a metered online model where the majority of our content sits behind a wall. We use a variety of free with registration and layering to draw in new customers and sell subscriptions. Subscriptions make up about 16% of our revenue, advertising about 47% of our revenue, events, books, and other products about 37% of our annual revenue. Our value proposition is a simple one: to sell more advertising online, to charge more for better or more specific targeting, to customize the user experience for our existing customers, making them stay longer, to enrich our subscription experience by cross-referencing to other enriched content, to surface other products or services to cross or upsell. You may ask, what have you been able to do? Oh, this is going to be great. As it stands right now, from previous efforts around semantic and content enrichment, our only real benefit we receive is limited to contextual advertising, and you've heard some people talk about that today. We provide ads based on certain content triggers and can offer that service for premium to our advertising clients. Does it generate a lot of revenue? Around $100K annually. Would we stop doing it? No. At first cut, it worked for us and it continues to sell. Another area we're interested in semantics is our customer data. You may ask, so where are you with your customer profiles? Beautiful. This table is just a sample of bringing our customer data together from various sources. By aggregating our customer profile information, we can build a better or more complete view of our customer data and consequently our customer. This sounds like it's cut and dried. It's not. There are varying degrees of completeness when it comes to assessing any content. And customer content is no different. Blending sources leads you to make some decisions on your data, validity of the combinations of that data, the source of truth and accuracy. An exercise of assigning weights and classing your content. We all affectionately call them business rules. You may ask, What does this mean to ALM? You guys are great. We've just started assembling our profiles, and things I think are looking pretty good. We have content created from content that we've either created or aggregated from other sources, organized by product, tagged according to taxonomy. We have reader, visitor, or subscriber information. He has a digital account. He told us he's a LinkedIn user. He tells us his practice area. We also have our products, maybe some related articles, new, local, or relevant events, new content additions to subscription products, books, magazines, or services. The idea is to try and paint a much clearer picture of our customers. If you think about our pool, it's big enough to not want to clean for sure, but contained enough where we can and will get a very clear picture of our users, their work, their interests, all related to their careers, perhaps even their work history. Now, in full disclosure, I could have used any picture for this slide. This is not one of our customers. This is my boss. Now, I use his picture in my presentations because I generally never know when he's going to show up to one of these things. And you may call it a shameful or shameless plug, but that's Jeff Litvak. Let me paint an ALM landscape a little bit better. We create or acquire content in many ways. 13 creation content methods, to be specific. We create content around our content with newsletters, directories, and profiles. We also acquire content from various sources, including AP, Pacer, and the courts, all in different formats, in varying degrees of what is considered well-formed. We store this in a MarkLogic database and enables us to deliver internally and externally in an infinite amount of ways. I think that's a pretty remarkable position for our technology team and our company right now. By bringing the two bodies of content together, we expect to do even more amazing things. You may ask, things like what? So what are the goals? As we focus on digital, making our websites rich, engaging, and interactive, we want them to be sticky. We want to automate content tagging for named entity extraction, categorization, and similar documents, and display results in the web in various applications. That'll make us more efficient. We're going to use MarkLogic and Themis in tandem to repurpose content to make metadata available and searchable, reuse. We're going to use semantics to connect the dots between our content and our customers to make it more personal. We're also going to be using a tool that's called Telium for both some in-depth behavioral tracking as well as tag management for us. You may ask, well, Gene, what are you hoping to do? Okay, so this is what we're hoping to do at ALM. We want to do customization based on the user's law firm, right? I know who the user is. If I know his profile information, I can pull that customization up, put it right on his page. I'd like to recommend content based on his behavior, or maybe make product recommendations based on his interests, or custom content around his practice area, or custom content by geographical region. Ultimately, the overarching goal is with big data, right? To combine enrichment with customer data and to drive personalization and content recommendations. A second case, the process of tagging citations, statutes, and regulations in XML is currently outsourced to a third party who uses a combination of technical queries and manual inputs. We hope to use Themis to extract citations in treatises and case law using a custom-made skill cartridge that will use a pattern recognition based on known and widely used citation principles. So you can see a representation that describes our future workflow and data flow for two streams. We'll always have some sort of manual enrichment going on. I think there's value in content creators who are in touch with their work, adding some level of enrichment as they see the value in it. Machine enrichment will be as good as you train it. The bigger and better the sample, the better the algorithms will work. And as publishers, we will create more content. We will also do that by hand, but also by machine. It will become more and more valuable for our people to get the lion's share of this enrichment already done for them. These two examples, news publishing and books publishing, demonstrate that we can simplify and automate the process, gaining efficiencies for our overtaxed content creators, saving third-party expenses as we touch the content less. Now you may ask, so Gene, what works? Brilliant. Like most things in life, what you get out of what you put in, you get out. There are a lot of pitfalls out there, and I couldn't possibly chart your course. But by learning from some mistakes and some things that we did right, I can tell you what I've learned, and maybe that can help you if you haven't started, or give you an idea how to start, or take a closer look at what you're doing right now and reassess it, or reinvigorate your effort in semantics to help advance your business. Dedicate people time to make sure this is internal. This isn't just some theoretical exercise. It really takes people in order to get this done. It takes time and investment. But in these days of data and information, it's the people time that will make the difference in the success of your semantics endeavor. Get help. I engaged vendors and sought out consulting. There's a lot of experts out there, probably more now than there ever have been. You can't be afraid to ask them for help. Know your content. There are people in your organizations that know almost everything about your content. Engage them. They're loaded with a wealth of knowledge. Taxonomy. We've talked a little bit about it today. We liked it so much we did it twice. In the beginning, we had a simple 80 or 100 node taxonomy, primarily for our news content. It proved really not to be enough because we're much more than we're more diversified than just a news organization. We developed a new faceted taxonomy with over 300 nodes. It's more reflective of our content offerings and the industry that we serve. Build, rebuild, and re-rebuild your use cases. The technology stacks and the content streams change constantly. Go back and re-examine your use cases. The more study and the more time that you put into that, and the more you know about your content, you will know more about your customers. It really is about refinement of your use cases as you move along. Now, before I let you go for your break, I can't let you go without a lawyer joke. I do work for American Lawyer Media, and I've heard, some lawyer jokes in my time. It's St. Patrick's Day, and as luck would have it, Kevin came across a leprechaun. He pounced on the leprechaun and asked to be granted his wish, because he knew if you catch a leprechaun on St. Patrick's Day, he's got to grant your wish. What might your wish be, the leprechaun says. Kevin pulls up a map of the world and points to North America. That's what I want, he says. Well, leprechaun looks and says, that's kind of a tall order, and I'm a little new at this. So what else do you have? He goes, well, if you can't give me that, how about you just tell me the name of an honest lawyer? The leprechaun says, let me take another look at the map. I want to thank you for your time. Fernando and all of my colleagues from today, and the SIAA and TEMIS for this opportunity. And I'll open the floor to any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Gene. Any questions? Well, you've wowed them, Gene.
Oh, I got
we do have one over
look,
there.
I got a question in the
Okay.
front.
I do. The LinkedIn connection to the lawyers, that's great. How's that working and what is it?
Well,
The question is the LinkedIn connection to the lawyers.
lawyer
just for-
profile, right.
Lawyer profile.
So, you can engage LinkedIn through their API for the public information that's available. There is a lot of information that's out there, right? If you looked at the pool that we have, if we looked at everybody in our pool, and that included lawyers and librarians and everyone, juniors and managing partners, you'd probably have about 1.6 million people somewhere in that neighborhood. I think we pulled in something like, I don't know, 2 million records from LinkedIn. Right? We pulled in a lot of, I would say, name and whatever public information is available there. The tricky part about that is the matching that you have to go through, right? So I showed you the sample of the data that we brought in. What we're going through right now is taking that and sort of layering it. Like, I know my registration database has very good information, right? Because no one gets in unless they give me X pieces of information. So I can build a little better profile around maybe where a person went to school, where he graduated from, and start sort of aggregating lists around that kind of data. It requires some work. It's not easy. It's not as easy as it's cracked up to be, but I think it's a wealth of information that's out there. There are a lot of data sources. I mean, you pointed out, there's a lot of data sources out there. I think bringing them together really puts the value in place.
Yeah, and I think LinkedIn's specifically challenging because of the restrictions they put in.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so whatever miracles you can do out of what they give you, it's great.
And lawyers traditionally don't share, right? They're not a sharing people. So whatever you can get, unless they're talking about themselves, and that's different. But I mean, if you're, they do use LinkedIn. That seems to be their tool in terms of connection points within their industry. At least that's what we've seen. So for us, it was a data set that we really wanted to pull in.
Any other questions?
How has expanding your taxonomy helped the expansion of your audience? What growth have you seen?
Well, yeah, that's a little tricky. I would say that what the taxonomy has done for us has really allowed us to categorize a lot clearer, right? So now I can take what was primarily tagged for news content before and sort of spread that around. I think what it's done is it's allowed me to sort of bring content sets together so I can share them with other groups that I know about, right? We're not doing a whole lot with our enrichment. I mean, as you can see, we have a lot sort of staked on the future set. So we've been able to do some things against contextual advertising, but it really is that, you know, I had that web page up there, and that's where we want to be, because I think the more that we know about, like I said, you know, we started out as a B2C, right? We deal with individual lawyers, but lawyers are parts of firms, and we're a B2B business. So I can build lawyer profiles. I can start to build firm profiles based on that information. And then if I can surface that content through a better set of tagging, now all of a sudden I can match my content with my user community a lot better. So I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, well, Jean, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
So we are going to take a break right now. We have lots of snacks in the back, and it's important that you get sugared up and caffeined up, because we have a great case study from Wiley, and after that we have everybody getting up on a panel, and I told everybody that you would be an audience that would be asking a lot of questions. So I want to make sure that you have enough caffeine in your blood and sugar so you can ask some great questions at the end. So it's about 2:25 now, so we'll get going about 5 of. Thank you. Wow, everybody got ready for the post-break session here. Thank you very much. So I would like to welcome Meltem Dinser, who's the VP of Smart Content Technology, up to the stage. And to give everybody a little bit of a background, Meltem worked at Thomson Reuters for 20 years and started as an entry-level programmer and moved areas every 2 to 3 years and did almost a 360-degree in various leadership roles for technology management for content, technology management for flagship products, for investment managers, and then core services. Meltem moved to Switzerland for 3 years to manage strategic core technology assets, then came back to Thomson Reuters' content area to run the company-wide information management initiative, the Content Marketplace. Now, Wiley has had Meltem's expertise in leadership for 6 weeks? 6 weeks. So welcome to the company, Meltem. You're presenting at an industry conference. So Meltem on the weekends volunteers as a debate judge for her daughter's debate club. So that'll be interesting Q&A. I don't know if we'll bring some of those skills in during our Q&A session. She visits seniors with dementia with her daughter and a therapy dog. And Molly and the dog's name is Molly. And I'm not sure if any of our other panelists today can really say this, but Meltem plays Assassin's Creed and is a big Assassin's Creed player. So please welcome Meltem Dinser.
Hi, everyone. So as Kathy mentioned, while I have many years of experience in the content, information technology, information modeling, semantics area, I've only been at Wiley for 6 weeks. So if I don't give you satisfactory answers about what Wiley is doing with semantics, it's not Wiley's fault, it's my fault. And I'm going to enlist Donna and Al in the back there to help me with the questions if I get stuck. What do I do at Wiley? To one of Fernando's points, so my boss is the VP of content. And I guess one of my reasons I was hired was to put together that dream team and then get things in motion and deliver and execute. So I'll do a little bit of a background for Wiley. So one of the things that have been fascinating to me the past 6 weeks is the over 200 years of history at Wiley. It's a company-founded business. Wiley family has been part of the business for 7 generations, and they still actually start at the bottom, work their way up, and Peter Wiley is the chairman of board. They published, when they started, a lot of famous literary figures. They published Herman Melville. Actually, in our boardroom, we have a little handwritten sheet. I think we charged money for Herman Melville for pencils or something. We published Victor Hugo, Charles Dickens, among so many other things. It's actually it's quite impressive. To my dismay, we moved from literary publishing and into knowledge publishing mid-1800s, and we still continue to do that. So we have, I think, 450 some Nobel laureates, and then we do publish journals, books, education materials, which I'll get to in a little bit. As of last year, we had 5,500 employees, 1.8 billion revenue. Last year, 40% of Wiley revenue was from digital publishing. As of today's announcement, now it's 50% of our revenue. And when we say digital, I'll get to this later also, when we say digital, we mean sort of PDFs, ebooks on Amazon, and the course materials, and CDs and all that stuff. Our global headquarters are very close here, Hoboken, and we are a global organizations. We have offices across the world. We have 3 unique businesses. Our largest business is global research. And this business, the flagship product is the Wiley Online Library. Most of you might have already known it. Your children might have used it. We do have about 4 million plus articles on Wiley Online Library. We work with the authors. We work with the societies. So we publish American Cancer Society journals. We publish European Molecular Biology Organization's journals. We have about 1,500 journals that we work with. Plus, our research business has 9,000 plus books, reference work, databases, and with over 2 million members of our societies. Subject areas also very diverse. We do physical sciences, we do engineering, social sciences, humanities, life sciences, and about 60% of the revenue for the global research business comes from digital publishing. Our second business is global education. This business is all about colleges, graduate students, undergraduate students, the course materials, learning materials, textbooks, online learning materials. Our current flagship product is Wiley Plus. So we work with the professors, they adapt a course, and then they ask their students to use the course, and then all the materials around the assessments, the coursework, the questions, supplementary information comes from the global education business. Again, a huge variety of the subject areas. This one even gets into statistics, geography, accounting, among all the science, in addition to all the sciences. Only 30% of the revenue is from digital in our global education business. And now we have the professional development. This is after you graduate, you start a job, or you're about to look for a job. So you want to sort of either certified, you want to improve your skills, so you want to get a CPA certification, for example. You want to go learn about Windows 9.0. So this business doesn't have a flagship single product. It has a number of products and has a number of franchises. For example, we have For Dummies. We published the For Dummies books. We do CPA Excel training and accounting and assessment programs. And about 30% of the revenue here is also coming from digital. So what are we going to? So where are we and where are we going? So we are in the middle of a huge transformation process. Currently, if you look at all of our publications and all of our businesses, we span a sort of a 360 of a career arc of a person. You can start using Wiley products when you first enter college. Actually, in Australia, you start using Wiley products if you're in middle school. So if you can start with Wiley when you're in college, you graduate, and if you want to actually improve your skills, learn about leadership skills or how to look for a job, you use Wiley products. If you become a researcher, a scientist, you use Wiley to publish your articles. You use Wiley to help you find journals, your peer reviews. Once you start your career, you use it to refresh your skills. You use it to we have the DISC assessment product, for example, so you use it to know what your strengths are. And then if you want to become a leader, we have training programs, acceleration programs to help you become a leader. And we don't put this in our official materials, but I think even after you retire, and if you want to learn how to fish, we even have Fishing for Dummies books. So the challenges yes, we do cover a whole span of a lifetime of a person, but the people are changing. Technology is changing. Demographics are changing. Students 5 years ago are very different from students now, and they're going to be very different from students 5 years from now. So I mean, if you have two children, and the way your 16-year-old learns today is very different from your 5-year-old learns, and it's very different from your 25-year-old learn, and so very different from how we learned in college. So the challenge is not only how you keep up with the technology, but how do you try to be 2 steps ahead and anticipate, because every time you learn about there's a new technology, every time Google comes up with something and Apple comes up with something, a large organization like ours, it takes you at least 2 years just to catch up if you know what you're doing. So you need to be able to flexible so you can quickly anticipate the changes and then keep up with them. Another challenge we have is because we have a long tradition and we have been in the business for a long time, a lot of our production and the workflows are optimized towards print. So our journals, we work with the typesetting and the composition, and now we optimize everything for print. As an add-on, we create XMLs, we put them online. In some cases, Donna tells me we create a course, and the course book would be ready, and then it takes us another 3 months to actually put it on Wiley Plus for the students. So one of other challenges, and something we have to figure out very, very quickly, is how to do the electronic first and then still print the print materials, because I think we are in a unique position in history, our generation, because we are not totally transformed yet. It is not the 22nd century. Most of us still like books. Most of us are still reading books, but not as much as we used to. So we still have to support the print business. We still have to print the books. We still have to print the journals, but we have to do the electronic. We have to anticipate the future. So somehow we need to balance the two and do both of them together. One other thing we'd like to do, and we're not quite able to do right now, is, as I mentioned, our subject areas are quite common, actually, across the 3 businesses. We do biology in research, we do biology in college courses, and now we even have biology for dummies. Those 3 biology sections are totally isolated and siloed, so you can't take a bit of even an anatomy picture from one business and then use it in another one. You have to redo everything over and over again. We do create questions for courses, and you might be creating a college algebra question for this particular course. And then since it's not quite yet enough tagged and we don't know that you have that question, you have 100 questions for college algebra here, another 100 you create over there. And if you think about college algebra, people have been doing algebra for about 2,000 years. There aren't that many questions that you're just going to come up with brand new these days. So we're not able to reuse them. So the third challenge that we have is how to break apart our content from the books, from the journals, from the course materials. How do we separate it, and then how do we actually apply semantics to them, know what they're about, know what they're good at, and then build relationships back and put them back together, not just to produce what we're producing today, but also to be able to produce tomorrow's products. So that's why I'm there, I think, to help everybody get organized. And one of the things I found, actually, I'm not starting from scratch. A lot of effort has been put in the past couple of years, which I'll get to some of the case studies. A lot of things have been done, so we need to actually now unlock the value, get it moving, take the content, sort of free it out of from our existing products, put it back together so we can build for future. And that's what we call smart content. What semantic enrichment means within the context of smart content is, so assuming you chopped up your existing content, assuming you have the building blocks, assuming you know what the question is, what a paragraph is, what a quote is, what a chapter is, whatever. How do you put it back together? How do you relate it? How do you discover what you have? How do you know what's relevant? Just because you have 7 sort of images on the same similar subjects, they may or may not be relevant to what you're trying to do. How do you know what's relevant? How do you know what is used and what's not used? How do you know what if you built a set of relevant articles, how do you know which relevant articles you built are actually being used and people are linking from one to the other? We also think that semantic enrichment is actually going to increase sort of credibility. It's going to allow us to build sort of maybe expert networks. It's going to allow us to get opinions from your peers. It's going to allow us to be able to rebuild what an article is saying using the data that contributed to the article. That's one of the things that that's sort of a very sort of a common relevant problem today. When the authors actually publish their articles, people now want to be able to not just read the article, but reconstruct it by using the underlying data. So how do we harvest it? How do we collect it? How do we put it together? And at the end, we think with semantic enrichment, once we're able to put it back all together, that's going to create us new revenue streams and new products. So I'll get into a little bit of what kind of a framework we follow before we get into the actual technical bits of it. Because I think that a big portion of being able to do semantic enrichment is not about the technology. Technology changes. So we talked about RDF. So there is RDF. There's going to be something else 2 years from now. There's going to be something else 3 years from now. So technology changes. You need to be able to adapt to it. And you need to know what the technology is. Another portion is the actual knowledge model. You need to know what your taxonomies are. You need to know what your ontologies are. You need to know what matters to you and what relationships matter to you and how do you bring it together. But just as important as your ontologies and what semantics does and technologies, it's the processes around being able to define what matters to you, being able to keep up with the taxonomies, being able to know where in the workflow semantic enrichment fits in, because there are many, many places that you could enrich your content, and all of them could be appropriate depending on what you're doing. So the processes and workflows are a big element of what we want to do with enrichment. and the people themselves. So we did talk about it. Not everybody knows what semantics mean. Not everybody knows or appreciates or have a feel for why we care. Why do I need semantics? I've been doing search for so many years. I can always do keyword search, and I can just type in a question. I get it in Google. What do I need to spend so much effort, so much money on doing the semantic stuff that you're talking about? So explaining it to people, getting them on board, putting it in contents in terms of what does it mean to me, is also a very important aspect of our framework. Built on top of it, what we've done is we've done a what we call the baseline enrichment project. We focused on our research business. We took all of our journal articles, we ran them through Themis, and we created semantic fingerprints of every single article. And now we actually put it in the day-to-day workflow. So any new article that comes in today, we are able to create that semantic fingerprint and store it in our knowledge store. And then you'll see a lot of rectangles with no names on them, because now we're starting identifying specific projects. Now that we have the fingerprint, now that we know what they're about, and now that we know we have relationships and some sort of an ontology and a model, what can we do with it? So we have, where can we put, so can I give it to the authors themselves? So can the authors tell us what the article is about and tag it in the beginning? Could I do related articles and put it out there so, so the scientists know that who else is writing similar articles to them, and does that help them with their peer review process? Could we build these taxonomies and sell them to others? It's so many opportunities, so many ideas. So we're in the process of working with the business, prioritizing that. What are we going to do with this enriched data? And then the business objectives are at the top. So as we mentioned, so we want to do new product models, maybe get into advertising, user profiling, knowing what our authors are, being able to disambiguate our authors, knowing that an author that submits a journal in the global research business is actually the same author that actually happens to be teaching at a university, is a customer of one of our coursework. So he actually also happens to be writing his own textbook that we haven't. So we don't know them that these people are the same people. So this is the conceptual architecture. I do have an asset-based content management in the middle. That doesn't mean that we've done such a great job and have a single CMS, like Kathleen mentioned the other day in her conversation. So we do have multiple CMSs. So this particular exercise focused on our CMS for journals, but the conceptual architecture, what we want to get to is a sort of a company-wide CMS or stores that we can store our textbooks or images or media or whatever. We have our content acquisition workflow coming in. So that's working with the authors, working with the book publishers, working with the question editors, just so we get the content. And we have the content delivery on the other side with many ways of delivering what we're building. Content enrichment goes across all of these steps in the workflow. We have an orchestration layer that plugs into wherever you happen to be in the workflow. And then in the middle of it, we have a knowledge store, which happens to be built on Alum, so we have an RDS store in the middle. We use Themis or others for text mining, so that as the articles come in, they extract the entities using the, I think we're using 4 cartridges from Themis today. It's the biology, chemistry, medicine, and I think related topic finder, 4 cartridges. And then what we're in the middle of figuring out is the authoring piece, the human element, who is defining taxonomies and what tools we use for that. So we're in the middle of deciding what user interface we're going to put so our experts can put in the taxonomies. I have to say, one of the things that I kind of find mind-boggling here is the variety of the taxonomies that are needed in this organization. So where I come from, Thomson Financial, we did, or even legal, so we did, there's Michal in the back, worked together at Thomson. So we did companies, we did people, we did geographies, we did countries, news. I think the most complicated was industry classifications, and people would fight over industry classifications. I had people who just could talk to you about 3 days on just one little item under the industry classifications. Here, every single subject has a taxonomy. Every single book potentially has a taxonomy, and it has to be correct. If you're publishing an article, you better, and it's a research article, you better be classifying it correctly. It's not good enough, it's not maybe good enough. So it's mind-boggling, and we are trying to figure out what's the best model, what taxonomies we build ourselves, what taxonomies we partner with our partners, like Scope over there. So what taxonomies somebody else already figured out, we go by, and how do we govern, and how do we sort of coordinate across all of them so we're not doing the same thing 5 times already with a lot of discrepancies. So that's a big challenge. The last box I have here is the thing that we did separately, and that's my case study here. So we did write a bunch of algorithms to figure out what articles relate to each other. So we created relationships, so we have bundles and clusters of articles that talk about the same topic, depending on the semantic fingerprint that we created from Themis, and now we did use, I think, statistical algorithms to figure out what are related, what are not related. So I just said what's on this page, so I'll skip this. So an example I picked up from our R&D site is, so this article happens to talk about the review of trends of lymphomas in equatorial belt of Africa. So we ran Themis, and Themis extracts tons of keywords from it. And now we apply those keywords into our algorithm, and we have a number of related articles. And this article was picked because of all these related topics, which is great. But then once you do that, how do you know, just because your algorithm said those are related, how do you know if they're really related? And do you care about that particular relatedness that your algorithms decided? So we've gone through a long QA process here, and the typical recall precision indexes don't necessarily help you in this particular case because it's very context sensitive, and you need to know the actual meaning of the article and what it was written about. So we had positive feedback. We also have a lot of feedback on what we should improve, and that's on the next page, and I'll come to that. So we said a lot of the articles came back as, yes, these are highly relevant. The clusters are correct. Some people said excellent match. So we had good results. But there were also cases that articles that were relevant, that should have been up there, were not. Because I think one of the things that was missing was the context. Articles that were not related showed up as relevant, again, because the context actually was a very small piece of the article. So there was something about domesticity in Britain on the 17th century. That was the article about, and it thought it was related to domesticity in China in 1965. Just because the title has the same words, and probably the article had the same words, if I'm reading an article on Britain 17th century, I'm not necessarily looking to read the article on China this century. So that's room for improvement, needs a lot of R&D to figure out how do we add the context in addition to the traditional statistical methods. We had noise, so a lot of words come up. If you're in the same journal, same topics, some words just do come up. Doesn't mean the articles are related. So we've done some work cleaning up the noise. One of the things that we're getting into is to look at when was the article published, and then maybe cluster around the articles published around the same area, or cluster around institutions. So apply some knowledge and relationships that we know of without waiting for the algorithms to come back. Context we talked about. We have to figure visualization you talked about. So we have to figure out what's a good way of displaying an organizing the results. Most of the off-the-shelf things give you a nice, cool-looking little bubble diagram, and then if you click the second bubble, suddenly, oh my God, you're overwhelmed with all these bubbles, and you have no idea what is related anymore. The feedback loop we'd like to get into, if we can get this into actual authors, actual journalists, and they can tell us, give us some feedback on what related articles they clicked on, so we know that what is useful for the customers versus some clicks never clicked. So we want to be able to use it back in our related article algorithms. And I already talked about the taxonomies. We do have to, yes, we did use the already there cartridges from Themis. We want to be able to prioritize the rest of them and figure out where to go, how do we go around enriching, defining taxonomies and governing them. So, so related articles was just one use case. The contributing work was being able to build that fingerprint. That fingerprint could be used for many, many things, not just for related articles. So if you actually take one and then follow the related articles, you can actually uncover a lot of new articles written. Or we're thinking if you cluster around geographies, and you can say if you're looking for just starting an article or looking for experts to help you, you can find out where the research is concentrated on a particular area in the world. We can take our textbooks. We have the Bible of Architectural Graphical Standard. It's this huge book, tons of money, and every constructor has that book. That is the Bible. It's a book. It's a book on a CD, it's a book, and as the name suggests, it's got millions of pictures in it. So can we take those pictures out? Can we tie them to our college materials? Can we actually help the constructors and the architects and the designers to put those with the blueprints and put a package together? Can we apply the taxonomy to the book so we can search and we can navigate within the book? Another thing we're thinking of doing is the peer review process is very painful for an author who's writing an article and wants to get it into a journal. Can we find the likely people who would be willing to do the review for you, and can we actually put a process together or a system together that they can annotate your articles, we can feed it back in there, put it back together. And lastly, can we search better internally and externally? So at Thomson, we were also trying to figure out how do we search better? How do we not just search, but ask a meaningful question and get a meaningful answer back rather than a sort of a corpus of 10,000 keyword matches? So if we do our semantic fingerprinting, if you do our knowledge model correctly, we think that we could ask better and more intelligent questions. My last slide. So the next for us is to get ourselves organized, to actually do this in scale, to get it in the hands of our authors, to get it in our products, prioritize the work, and then integrate it in our day-to-day workflow. So we can do it as an author submits an article, we can do it as we edit it, we can do it as it goes into our online journals. Taxonomy governance I talked about 3 times already. You can tell how important it is to me. And then we have to sort through our use cases and make it happen. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, since we're about to go into Q&A, I'm going to invite Meltem to sit up at the front table, turn right around. And I'd like to invite all of our other speakers during the day to come up to the front. Danielle Mayer, please come up from Themis. So I promised everybody during our prep calls that this audience was not shy, so I hope you do not prove me wrong. And since we've introduced everybody, I have one last person just to introduce while we're getting settled, and I just invite you to sit down at any mic that you so choose. So Danielle Mayer is the VP of Marketing for Themis, the leading provider of semantic content and enrichment solutions for the enterprise. In this capacity, he's responsible for promoting as well as shaping the flagship Lucid product range and its roadmap with a particular focus on STM publishing and enterprise information management. Prior to joining Temis, Daniel served for the past 15 years in a variety of marketing and product strategy functions throughout the IT value chain. Daniel holds a master's degree in business from HEC, France, and a master's in computer science from ENTST in France. Now, Daniel, his factoid is that he's actually a dual citizen. That's not the exact term you use. It's
Dual national.
Dual national, and he's offered to present his comments either with a French accent or with an English accent. So if you have any preferences when you're asking your questions, just please state so. So with that, please welcome our closing panel.
So thank you very much, Kathleen. Kathy, sorry, thank you very much, but I'll continue with the American accent if you don't mind. I could do French, I could do German, if you really push me.
Great.
You'd like German?
German would be great.
Okay, we at the break we'll do German.
Okay.
I could do a variety of other things as well, but okay. So I'd like first of all to congratulate all of our speakers today for the excellent quality of their deliveries and the content that they presented to us. And obviously it's time for questions. So a number of questions were already asked, but I assume that there might be a few other ones, maybe many other ones that weren't covered yet. The first question, is always the toughest, and that's where we see the courageous people in the audience, who are really audacious enough to, provoke thought in the audience and so on. So, I'd be happy to greet those courageous people. Thank you. Could you maybe stand up and introduce yourself, and we'd be glad to address your questions.
I'm Sasha Schwartz from the Optical Society, Washington, D.C.
Hi, Sasha.
My question primarily for Melton, but for others as well. My question is primarily for Melton, but for others also. You mentioned that Wiley, to some extent, is print-oriented, but I assume that the journal part of Wiley has a highly structured XML content. So the question is, in this semantic enrichment project, have you been able to take advantage of the high structure, the highly structured XML content? And if so, how did you leverage that part in semantic enrichment?
So I think, I don't know if it's on.
It's working,
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
So I think in this particular work, it was just running Temis through and extracting a semantic fingerprint. What we're planning to do for our smart content part, there is highly structured XML content, and there is a rich content model in Wiley ML. So we're planning to take what's in the content model and use it to do the overarching information model for all of our content and the journals and the books. And that would be the granularity, and we call it Lego blocks. Then once we separate it out, then that's the structured version of our content. And then we'll use enrichment together with that to put it back together as a complete information model. So this particular case study, I think, was just straight through run Temis against the articles. Good question.
Any of the other panelists would care to share a perspective on Sasha's question, use of structured content in addition to unstructured?
Yes, I think anyone who sits on a ton of highly structured XML content is sitting on a pile of money that could be semantically used to relate it to other content, to help with inferences, to help drive new insights from that highly structured XML content. The beauty of the highly structured XML world is that you can twist it and mold it and change it in many different ways. So a lot of the metadata that you have in those journals could be easily applied and marked as RDF facts or other forms. So if you already went through the trouble and have curated XML content for journal, books, magazines, and other things, I'd say, you're very lucky, because the semantic roadmap will be a lot easier from the content.
Just from the processing side, though, we use it only to know, okay, we know that this is a headline, we know that this is the body. It helps us when we are going to send the content to the tagging engine, to tell the tagging engine, maybe you're going to weight the headline a little bit more, or we're going to know that the source publication means that a rule might be applied, you know. But we don't, I think Fernando's use case about being able to monetize that, that's that semantic web part that we haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah, I think the only, I mean, I agree with Fernando completely. I think that the part about getting the value out of the content really comes from the people that you're going to have associated with it. And it goes back to what you were saying about being able to create these products sort of in many different ways. You have to have the thinkers. You have to have the people who know the content. And not just necessarily the products that you're already putting out there, but being able to think in terms of what new products you can glean from it. I think there's an infinite amount of value there.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean, Kathleen, Fernando, Melton. Let's have another question from the audience. Yes, sir. Here's the microphone.
Hi, Vincent Collier from Bloomberg. I was wondering if the panel could describe, different members of the dream team to put together have been talked about. Most of us, I think, are pretty familiar with technology types in that time. But could the panel describe what the traits and skill sets of an ontologist should be?
Traits and skill set.
If you were to write a job posting, what would it read like?
Fernando?
Yes. One is excellent data modeling skills. So ontologists need to express concepts, things, in a way that can be easily described by models. You could have two ontologists equally experts in OWL, RDF, SCOS, and RDFS, and other techniques. One who thinks very clearly and succinctly, and the other one who will just create walls of terms and relationships and concepts. I say that the best ontologists are the ones who understand the true value of the work they do for the applications they serve, and they don't think too highly of themselves, thinking that the end result is that model itself.
So I think that absolutely. So that I would also add, I think two things. So I had a group of ontologists and were very into RDF and OWL in my previous job, and I have them here. They tend to be very passionate, and they might come across as ontology snobs to the rest of the organization. So I think one of the traits that I look for is being able to describe an ontology to a lay person without using the word ontology. So that's
I think that's exactly right.
Well, I think it's also just that being able to think in these, it's just these webs and paths and things. I mean, you have to think, and anything you do impacts 40 other things. I guess it's kind of like chess, you have to be thinking the 5 moves ahead. I don't actually play chess, and I'm really sort of more of an accidental ontologist. But it's being able to visualize a map in your head also. And I definitely agree that not taking it too seriously and not taking your, what your work is, you need SMEs to help you, right? You can either have an ontologist who is an SME, and you get lucky sometimes that way. Frequently, you're going to have an ontologist who is an ontologist, and they just have to learn the discipline that you're in. And so, in either of those cases, you can't take yourself too seriously, and you have to get other people's feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say they have to be in touch with the real world too, right? Because it's a science, right? I mean, you can get folks who are going to be so well developed, so intellectually well developed with this. But if you can't translate that to how it's going to affect your organization, you're just going to have someone who's very highly intellectual, and it's going to take you a lot longer, I think.
Yeah, not be academic about it. There are, people, this is the way you're supposed to do this, and this is the way, but we all know that what happens then in the real world frequently doesn't have anything to do with that. So it might be pretty, and it might be right in some way, but if it's not going to actually work like government taxation and revenue in the real world, give it up and move on.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to maybe, if you don't mind, extend the question a bit. You mentioned the dream team, so is the ontologist the only member of the dream team?
So I'm in the middle of assembling a team. So I think, so you do need the ontologist. You do need somebody to understand the actual model and where the authorities are, how it hangs together in addition to the ontologist. You need someone who knows your technical capabilities and how they work together and how content flows from one technical capability to the other across your end-to-end infrastructure. You need to have products, to your point. Unless you have products, you have somebody who knows what to do with all the semantic magic you've done and how to make money off of it. It's a very nice exercise, and you can write an article about it, but not much. I think
I agree.
that's the ingredients, yeah.
And I think, again, how do you surface that model? How do you surface the data? How do you surface the information and the insights that get generated? I can never stress enough the need for a very strong user interface that can portray the idea to people who all they care about is the answer, not what data model happened underneath to make it happen.
And I can't believe how many people you can talk to who say, oh yeah, that's so cool, and yeah, we should do that, but then there is no product. There's nobody who really understands how to productize it. I will say that that's certainly what has kept us back from actually having more to show today, is not the semantic technologies and any of that. It's really having somebody on the business side who can say, okay, this is how we're going to use it. And I think you need to start with one very extremely targeted thing, not just, okay, we're going to tag all our content and we're going to have semantic technology. Let's just pick one thing that we think, even if it's one vertical or one blog or one something, or one product, maybe a mobile product or something. But I can't emphasize enough that the disconnect between, yeah, that's so cool, yeah, we should do that, and like, how do we actually then put that in the market is significant.
I think one other thing, because you did mention it in your presentation, I think executive sponsorship is important. Because it does take a while to mine all the data, put it together, have a nice visual, so you can put it in front of your business people and say, look what I've got. Just to get that level, sometimes you need to spend a year, 18 months. So somebody has to be sponsoring the work, even without the product idea. So the product folks could look at what's available, what's possible, and then the next stage, then they can make it into a real product. So there's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing there, so you need the executive sponsorship.
And you said be able to explain an ontology without ever saying the word ontology. to most, to most of the people that need to use this, but don't use any of that language.
Yeah.
Controlled vocabularies is a word I try never to use in rooms outside of this one.
And I think it comes down, I've seen this on numerous technology projects. It's sort of any project that involves any sort of technology. You really have to have ownership for it, somebody to drive it, right? So, it's great to have an idea. You do need an executive sponsor. I think that's good, right? Somebody's going to pay the bill. But then you actually need somebody to own it and be willing to get into the depth of what ontology really means, and then to be able to explain that at a business level, but also to be able to drive the pieces that need to be moved, because there's a lot of moving pieces to it.
So I think we had an additional question here in the audience.
Okay.
Sir.
John Corkery from Semantic. First, I just wanted to say thank you to SIAA and Temis for putting this together. For people like us who try and build products on enriched content like you're talking about here, this is great. A couple of people mentioned that they had maybe done taxonomy twice. I think it was Mark Twain who said life is like being tethered to a horse and dragged down a bumpy road backwards. So is it more of a waterfall project or an agile project, or is it something that you learn by doing and it's an ongoing type of thing? Can you just maybe walk us through a little bit some of the best practices? Thank you.
Well, I don't know about best practice, because we did it twice.
There's still practices.
We got a lot of practice out. I think the first time we took a look at it, we did it as a waterfall project. But we gave it such a short time span that we really rushed it in. And again, I think we were primarily focused on news content. And it was a great taxonomy for news content as far as we were concerned. Didn't do anything for us for the rest of the business. So then I think as we started to, again, we went through sort of a major management change. And people who really were were driven by analytics and data and this whole sense of, you know, I mean, I know we throw this big data term around a lot, and I don't really have it at ALM, but my data is big to ALM, and there's a lot of stuff to mine there. And I think that from when those folks came in, it changed the way we were even looking at our taxonomy. So then we looked at it as more of an agile project. And we started to say, well, wait a second, this isn't just for news anymore, right? This is gonna wrap around all of our content. So let's bite off what are the four main areas that drive our content, and then let's take a look at what those areas are and what are the pieces that interrelate between those areas. And that's how we started to do it. And it's changing. You know, if I told you we were done, I'd be lying, right? We're not done. It's gonna change again. And I think part of it is just, I think you want to do that because the times are changing and the content is changing too, and you're adding things into your content stream. So, is it going to be radically different? I don't know, but it's going to change.
That shouldn't scare you though. You know, a taxonomy is a living and breathing thing. I mean, they're still fighting about the Linnaean taxonomy right now, right? I think one of the mistakes we made was trying to do all of it at once and thinking, you know, okay, we'll just do everything. Take small pieces of it, but it's always going to change. It's going to grow, and it also doesn't take a year to do a taxonomy. Even if you have very complex content, it doesn't take a year, or at least a first pass. And I mean, I think you have to do a first pass and try it. And don't think, okay, we're going to get to this, we're going to have this done thing, and then we're going to test it. It should be agile. It should be tested, you know, constantly.
I agree. I think another danger in building the taxonomies on their own is the single threading problem of, first we got to get the taxonomy right before we do anything, because how can we build anything without having a knowledge base to drive it against? And there's just a lot to do. So single threading is one of the reasons why projects take longer. Mm-hmm. And before you know it, you know, have you ever seen this software development problem where you spend 12 months doing business requirements, and then you give it to a developers and say, yeah, we got a month to build it. That's not what you want. So multi-thread as much as you want. Build the core components. Yes.
That's not how you're supposed to do it?
No. But so make sure that it's a multi-threaded approach in which you're building the core domain knowledge, but at the same time you don't have everyone waiting to build the other components, which are equally important in this part for semantic publishing.
I would also say I wouldn't do taxonomy by committee. You yes. need SMEs to be involved, but the benevolent dictatorship idea to start with, you know, where you at least, you start, you have a framework and you say, okay. But if you try to do it just from scratch with committee, you'll be miserable.
Then it takes a year.
Then it takes a year or more.
That was the first time.
Say no to committees.
So I think we have a first question here and then another one in the back.
Okay, great. Hi, Forrest from Silverchair. The context for this is I'm looking for a practical way to monetize some of the assets, as I think a lot of people here are. So we've been enriching our content. We're mostly STM content. We enrich it with categories, and we've been passing that information to advertisers. So contextually, where is somebody on the site? Probably for the past year or so, we've been doing user behavior profiling, so we can also tell them no matter where they are on the site, what the person actually prefers. So maybe looking at one piece of content, but we know that they would, you know, typically tend to look at a different piece of content. I'm wondering if any of you all have any experience with working with advertisers and taxonomy is on their side to consume this data. Because I think what we're seeing is that we're sort of ahead of them, and that having this conversation that we thought would be really obvious is not so obvious to them. So any suggestions you have or experience you have with that?
Yeah, I think we're in the same boat. We're a little bit ahead of our advertisers. So, which is a reason why one of the, I mean, it's been a growth challenge for us in that area, right? It's, you know, we can offer it, and I wouldn't remove the contextual advertising from, we tried. I wouldn't remove it from our website. But yeah, I think we're a little bit ahead of the game on that too.
I think we need to educate those in the front line.
Yeah.
Well, the problem are the multiple taxonomies too, right? Because I have a taxonomy and everybody else in the news business has a taxonomy, and there's the Google News taxonomy, and you know, so do we have to map all those together? We actually have our ad serving stuff has its own taxonomy, and so, you know, despite the fact that we've actually tried to cut down the number of them, obviously you can't. I think that the programmatic ad buying that is really going to explode here is going to impact that quite a bit. I'm not entirely sure if it will help then to, you know, I'm actually kind of scared about that one right now. You know, if Procter & Gamble now says they want 100% of their ad buys to be programmatic by 2015, what does that mean then for me saying, you know, but you know, we want to be able to sell you this specific keyword, and so then does that mean I've got to then interact and interface with the programmatic ad thing, and are they even going to let me and want me to?
Yes, and I mean, there's companies today in New York that buy space in those ads. They buy themselves. Only when the user clicks through it is that they get reimbursed. So they're spending a lot of money to try to figure out what is the ad that's going to get more action. I think that semantic or in context or in text targeting, as they call it, is going to drive that ability for them to be sure even more that as they put those ads that they pay in themselves will get clicked through, and that will lead to a purchase. So yes, but it's great to be at the forefront of something, isn't it? I mean, you in many ways get to lead and dictate how things will be. So a great space.
The problem is, how long are we going to be at the forefront, right?
Okay, so we had a question at the back as well.
Michal Finkelstein from Qubits, a startup here in New York, and an ex-colleague of Melton from Thomson Reuters. So my question is about taxonomies, actually. I think many new services, more modern services, are moving away from taxonomies, trying to adopt folksonomies, so crowdsourced taxonomies like Wikipedia, DBpedia. You know, as you hinted, it's sometimes dangerous to put everything in the heads of an ontologist. And again, some companies try to stay away from it. So the question to you is, have you considered moving away from taxonomies into folksonomies? Could it really work for bigger organizations like the one you represent? Have you considered it? That's the question.
So why is everybody looking at me? So I don't know if Wiley has considered it, but thinking about your question, I think it's a combination. Because in some certain subject areas, so if you're talking about, I don't know, neuroscience, there's a certain taxonomy about neuroscience. So you have to know the official taxonomy for the neuroscience, or algebra, or whatever, or biomedical subjects. So it depends, I think, on, it's not a one way or the other question. So I think the problem to be solved in taxonomy is how many you want to do, what each taxonomy accomplishes for you, and then is it a combination of then the folksonomies and taxonomies and other things that might come up. So the key is to be able to do whatever, it's a very generic answer, but I think it is true. The key is to be able to do both and do it so in a coordinated way, and being able to govern why you're choosing a certain way for what purpose. I think that's what I can say with my 6 weeks of expertise here.
No, I agree. I think some organizations have a workflow process for taxonomies that is very restrictive, and sometimes there's a reason for that. A change has to go through a committee, and it has to be approved, have to figure out what's the place. Meanwhile, there's new terms coming in that aren't being applied. So I think a blend will always make more sense. how you move that lever and how much of it do you apply in a given context, I think it's going to drive the benefits in this case.
Yeah, I mean, I think Twitter is the biggest example of, yeah, folksonomies really work, right? But if you've ever dug into the DBpedia data and seen the number of categories that have been assigned to an individual person, and the like craziness that goes on there, you'll see, okay, that's great, we need that. I would like to get people's feedback. If they want to tag something purple because that's what they see, we can derive value from that and see patterns and use that. But at the same time, I've also got to know that there is this, for ad serving, for a lot of other reasons, I have to know that there's still this one official term. And because there's too much data in folksonomies. But absolutely the combination of the two.
I think in our case, we're not dealing with the volume of content or the volume of audience, for that matter, where it would, be practical for us.
But I'd also say, you were saying going away from taxonomies, ontology is the going away from taxonomy piece in the more sort of scientific approach to it.
Okay, Darrell?
Yes, Darrell Gunter Media Group. This is more of a statement and clarification to ontologies. During my time at Calexis, we had an agreement with the NIH, and the NIH actually employed 4 people who worked full-time on updating their ontology. And because what they would see coming in from the various different researchers from around the United States and the world, they just felt that they just wanted to try to stay ahead as much as they could, and they still couldn't with those 4 people that I'm sure still, this was 2008, so it's an ongoing process, it's a never-ending development.
Thank you, Darrell. Okay.
Hi, I'm Sean, I work at Gannett. I have a question. I'm going to go a little bit, build on your question, also build on the dream team, and go a little bit ahead. I know that you mentioned manual user enrichment of data earlier. And I'm wondering if any of you have any experience or advice, and I know this is kind of going a little bit too far ahead maybe, on actually taking that passively collected data, both on the curatorship side and enrichment side, and also hopefully eventually on the product side, working that back into the ontology or the taxonomy and actually learning from that. I know that's probably someone else's startup, but I just wanted to see if you guys have any advice, or I won't even ask for best practice, but any kind of tips or use cases in that regard.
I'm not sure we understood your name. I'm sorry.
I'm Sean Sullivan, and I work at Gannett.
Thank you, Sean.
So I have, we haven't done it at Wiley yet, but that's one of the things we're looking at. How do we combine the best of the 2 worlds? So how do we do the constant feedback loop? From Thomson Reuters, I did have some experience. We took the other way a lot. There was a lot of manual work, not enough automation. And we had started, there are startups, there are people who are looking at curation as a sort of a whole package, and what is the right way of automating first. So what we do normally used to do is manual first, and then go fix it in the background with the services and the technology. So how do you turn it upside down? How do you do the automated work first? And that's what we're getting into. And then have the enough user interfaces and hooks in the workflow, so you expose it, you get the expertise of the crowd or your internal people, and then feed it back. I think that's where we want to get to. And there are some startups we had started talking to when I was at Thomson. So, but I think that's where everybody's going to get to eventually, because you can't, I don't think technology is advanced enough to do it 100% yet.
Thanks, Sean, for bringing up something for me more to worry about then. Sean is my Gannett colleague, but we hadn't met until today, didn't even know of each other, so we're really getting off to a good start, Tom.
I think that you're gonna, you could get into one of these like first things first kind of thing, and I think that's what we struggle with all the time, right? You have limited amount of resources, people. I don't like to call them resources. You have a limited amount of people and a limited amount of expertise, and if you try to bite off more than you can handle, you're not going to make any progress against it. I do think that's the way that you have to go, though, because it's going to be, we are going to get to the point, because we're talking about it right now, right? you know, you hear about these technologies like narrative science, right, where you can take statistical data and turn it into an article or a piece of content, right? They do it in baseball statistics all the time. So you start to think about that, how that can apply in how you're going to be pulling, you know, disparate semantic pieces together. Maybe you've got another way of pulling content in. Well, what are you going to do with that content? You're going to have to enrich it somehow. And if you're pulling in massive amounts of content, you're going to want to enrich that content in a big way. But you're not going to want to trust that all the time. You're going to have people looking at it, right? I think it's just the nature of how you, you know, how you make it more valuable for who your reader or your subscribers are.
And finally, I don't think it's, I'm sure it's not a problem at Gannett, but it is a problem in other organizations. There's a divide between the content and the delivery teams. And the delivery teams typically don't send information back or don't see it as, you know, how is it that I take what I'm doing on the delivery side and send it back to the content team so that they can do something with that information to affect how the analysis or the information is brought in. So breaking those silos that happen in between organizations can foster that exchange of data between the user and the content teams.
I think there's a lot of, I mean, just in our company, in the publishing space, you know, there's a lot of this digital first, right? There's a lot of talk of digital first. And, you know, I was just having a conversation with somebody here. Just last week, I had somebody from the print side actually come up to me and say, you know, I want to get rid of the tool that we're having and I want to go digital first, which is like, I heard the angels singing in the background, because you know, we've been singing that song for a long time, but to have the editorial people now come back to me and say, this is what we want to do, I got a driver there, you know. I think if we looked at that workflow, it would fundamentally change all of this talk of how we're going to be dealing with machine-generated content and machine enrichment. Right now, you're breaking that print silo, that whole workflow down, and saying we're doing this all differently.
Next question. I have one, if nobody has one. Always ready with a question. So my question would focus on, let's say, maybe the possible changes that you might be seeing in your processes, in your workflows, compared to, let's say, the old way, or the traditional way, or the classical way, you know, of doing publishing. Are you seeing any changes there that you think the audience should be aware of, to be ready to face, you know, when dealing with these projects?
I think there are potentially a huge number of changes that you can think of in the end-to-end work, even how the companies are organized and the roles, how the content flows from one job to the other. I think if Wiley were to actually go to smart content, digital first, turn things upside down, do it differently, there are enormous amounts of changes, I think, for everyone. For everyone.
Right.
Including our vendors, I mean, the employees, everybody. It's a very different way of doing business, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You take it to the extreme.
What I would hope is that there just seem to still be so many processes, and we move content around so much from one system to another and from one place to another. I think if we could shrink that down, would be extremely helpful. And also, just from the tagging perspective, I feel that we need humans to participate in that. A tagging engine, as good as any of them are, as they all are, as Temis is, it's not 100%. And so whenever a human can be involved, I think you're just going to get that much higher quality. But the surprising resistance still to adding another 20 seconds or 30 seconds of work when you're in a newsroom is, to a lot of people, we're like, it's 20 seconds. And we get a lot of pushback on that. So introducing the idea that part of your job, part of the way you're going to have been measured on the way you're doing your job is to do this tagging thing and interact with it is a huge sea change for editorial.
Mm-hmm.
Become a data scientist. I'm telling you, it's the way to go. It's going to change things because all of this data, all of this aggregation that we're doing, all of this content that we're putting together, you're slicing it, you're dicing it, you're going to want to serve it up in so many different ways. You're also going to want to analyze it. Become a data scientist.
Okay, further questions from, yes, sir.
David Jolliffe from Pearson. Kathleen mentioned rights management in her presentation, but she was the only one. I work in the intellectual property field, so she's my favorite so far. So I wanted to ask the others how or whether they see rights management dovetailing with semantic structuring.
Thank you, sir.
Hugely, I'd say. I think because of semantic technology, you will have, not technology, but a way of describing your assets more granularly. You'll have the ability to enforce rights that might change depending on different contexts, where you're given, where the freemium concept can live. You know exactly what granular piece is that you're going to tease the buyer with before you start bringing them to your paid walls. So I think it has a great bearing into how it is that digital rights can affect some of the information. When I combine information from public sources, some I can offer immediately, other has to be bought. So even public data is not as free as you might think. So you have to be fully aware of where in my domain do I have to exercise digital rights, and if I have the ability to mark those rights as facts that affect the content itself, then you'll have more granular ability to do rights management.
Yeah, I agree completely. So in my previous incarnation, so we've put the content about the digital rights into the model, into the semantics, when we describe the content. So when it went out the door, it had enough of an information for an application to be able to apply it. And the same idea applies here as well. So there's the modeling and putting the placeholder in place in your content and in your ontology. There's also defining your authority. So it's knowing your authors, knowing your institutions, knowing your customers. So if you have the authorities, the masters define this ambiguity, so putting them together plus your whatever the software you choose then for digital asset management, that's digital rights management, that they all go together. So it was
I don't know if it makes it any less of a headache, though.
No, not at all.
And honestly, I work through the content licensing group too, and our boss's solution was, we're signing single content right stuff across AlgaNet. Nobody gets any special. You don't get to do this and just have that. That's it. We're doing it that way. So.
It becomes really important if you do any licensing with your content. I mean, I know it plays a big role in what we do because we have licensing agreements in place. And I have timing associated with that. So.
And so maybe we're doing it that way, and we're sort of have it in the semantic model. But then, when you're syndicating it out, can they interpret that? Right? You have huge interpretation problems, or the system's talking back and forth. That's why anybody who's really passionate about linked data is just like, oh, please, just everyone, let's get on board with this so we can talk to each other and do less translation.
IP? More? No? Other questions?
Hi, Rebecca Shambada from Publishing Technology. Thanks for all this information today. It's been great. I just wondered if you all could just comment on one or two reasons why somebody or a publisher should go down the semantic route. What would be like the number 1 and 2 that you would say return on investment, future-proofing for slicing and dicing content down the road? What would you all say?
I would say more than anything, it's new products. We have been involved in projects in which semantic technology has been put for purely operational efficiencies, but those don't go far. I mean, you need to have a CTO with deep pockets and a strong belief in semantic technology. So I'd say new products, there's definitely the future proofing, but the semantic approach to how the information is used and leveraged can yield a lot of interesting ideas of things we don't even know are applicable today. So I think that's one of the main reasons. If a company is dying and they need to generate new products or else, those are the ones that are typically investing in all this new cutting edge technology. So I'd say new products definitely.
Yeah, I think it's if Google is, you know, if Google's semantic search and knowledge graph based, then we better be too. I think basically for media, and it's definitely the kinds of products that we can create, because there's just so many other pressures that if we don't figure out different products, you know, that's it.
I think it's twofold. I think it's products, but I also think it's internal analysis. I think you want to know sort of, you know, across sort of business organizations, what you can do with your content, or what is being done with your content, right? There's this analysis piece of it that I think it's valuable internally in companies, and you know, maybe that helps drive other products, or maybe it helps you change the products that you have. But I think that there's two pieces to it. So there's definitely new products that you could generate. But I also think there's this internal sort of knowledge set that you glean from it. You can know more about it.
I don't think it's really a choice. I think it's something either you do or you disappear. So you turn into Encyclopedia Britannica or Kodak or one of those. I think that's where the world is going. I think the devices are getting smaller and smaller. You can't look at 10,000 articles. You can't process that much information unless you get exactly what you want in a narrowly defined way, which you can only do with semantics. I don't think there is a choice, to be perfectly honest.
We have a question back here, and we have really just time for one or two more questions, Danielle.
I'm Andrea Broadbent with Content Pro Partners. It seems to me, in my mind, for where I come from, is that semantic technology facilitates the convergence of different industries. You have content, you think you're in a dying industry, that content you've published complements some other industry. There are gems in your content that complement something else. The convergence of, let's say, the convergence of disparate disciplines. And I think semantic technology helps to bring them together in a big way. Thank you.
So I actually think I agree with that. There's a little video, I don't know if you've seen it, Tim Berners-Lee, when we first started talking about RDF and semantic technology and opening up the data. It's just give me data, give me data, give me data, and open it up and free it from those websites. I think that's where the world is going to get to. So it's not going to matter you come from publishing or manufacturing or whatever. Data is data. And if you describe it, put it exactly, so we put it out there, so many different uses that we don't even think about, that we can't even imagine right now.
And I think, too, that there's so much, I mean, when we've been sort of talking around the topic, but there's so much data, there's so much content out there. I mean, I get questions all the time that say, well, you know, filter it for me, right? It's the reason why I want it to be personalized, because I want to know what content you're reading. I don't want to serve you 10,000 pieces of content. You're only going to look at one. You don't want to see 10,000 pieces of content. So, I mean, I think the semantics part of it helps us help you, right? I mean, that's what it does. It's the old expression.
And I agree with you that it's inevitable. There's so much more information we get every day, every company just inundating itself with data. You need to have a different model for dealing with it than what you had before. It is as inevitable as it comes.
Yeah, so the industry's not dying, it's just the models and that we've been going by and the distribution, you know. Let's hope.
Okay, thank you very much for your insights. I think we should first thank our audience. You've been wonderful. Lots of questions, lots of diverse questions, so thank you very much. And thank you very much to our speakers, Kathleen Cote from Gannett, Meltem Dinser from Wiley, Jean Bishop from American Lawyer Media, and Fernando Mesa from Clarté. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Danielle. And Temis, once again, thank you for sponsoring today. And we are going to actually be going into a Temis party. You might be noticing that in the back, the coffee has disappeared, and we have some wonderful delights plus a little wine in the back. I would like to invite the Executive Vice President of North America for Temis to the podium to talk about Temis and what we're celebrating here today. Guillaume.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to thank again our speakers, Meltem, Jean, Kathleen, and Fernando. Thank you so much. I think you've shared a lot, and you've shared very openly, and you told us some very good stories. So I think all of us have some good lessons that we've learned today. What I like personally is this notion that the issues, the benefits were the same, even if we heard from use cases in news, media, STM, B2B magazines. So I think this was, enlightening for today. I want to have a word and recognize the great work produced by the SIIA. Temis has been a long-time member and a long-time believer in the SIIA work. I think you guys do an amazing job at advocacy, of course, and we as an industry need this work. We love your events. I mean, the flagship event in New York, the Information Industry Summit, is a great get-together for this industry, so I hope you will join us next year. And the targeted events, like this one today. So I think we came up with this idea of taxonomy or a semantic bootcamp a couple of months ago, and this came to reality today. So thank you so much for all your good work, and keep doing it. So this event that we have later today, I mean, first, all of you are very welcome and invited to stay with us. It's the official product launch for Luxit 7. Luxit is the name of our platform. I won't unveil what this is all about, but it's really a key milestone for us. So you'll have a high-level presentation and then demonstration, and then everybody can stay for drinks. So we hope you can stay. Thank you so much for attending, and please stay with us. Thank you.